ladies and gentlemen, it is now 4:30. However, we cannot start the meeting until we have a quorum of council. So our procedure bylaw states that we must wait upwards of 15 minutes to determine whether or not we achieve quorum. So the time starts now. Bear with us.
We get a pop. What?
I think he's on holiday.
He's still on holiday.
Jimmy's on holiday.
Yeah.
What's Diana?
Two people sitting on the floor.
Cheryl's away. No Armstrong. Absent Councilor Thorpe, yeah. So Councilor Brennan this way.
Councilor Brennan?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Ian's bringing her. Yes. I'm bringing both of them. And Councilor Armstrong is going. And Councilor Gibbs, yeah.
Brennan is on her way.
No, she's not coming.
Right.
Yeah.
Councilor Kip is away.
Yeah. September. And Armstrong is away.
I
For either bill. I don't think you'll.
Was that?
We're waiting for either bill. I'm not expecting Councilor. I saw Councilor do it with his daughter before the meeting, so I don't know if he was finished.
Councilor Starfleet stopped at the mayor's office at 4:15.
Yeah.
Did he go there? Did he go to?
Maybe he went to.
That's where I had him. Once I get walked out, you can see the back.
Can we stand up?
No.
Oh, yes.
I don't know.
It's like.
Oh, really? Yep. Oh, do you know if you went to the other building or not?
Is it so? I don't feel so bad now.
So you know. Oh, don't write that.
I don't feel so bad now, Bill. There too.
Call the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. Can you note the time at 4:33, please? Introduction of late items. Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. This evening we have agenda item 8A, Buttertugs Marsh Conservation Area Management Plan. We're adding delegations from Tom Reed and Doug Jan from the Nature Trust of British Columbia. We're adding item 8B, or not adding, pardon me, we're changing the name on the agenda to read as follows for item 8B, Geographic Information System Technology Plan, and also correcting the titles of the attachments as follows for the needs assessment. It is Geographic Information System, GIS Technology Plan, and Conceptual System Design, Geographic Information System, GIS Technology Plan. Agenda item 10A, a notice of motion for Union of BC Municipalities, UBCM. Councillor Brennan, re-term of office. We're changing the wording of the proposed motion, and Councillor Thorpe is going to give that notice of motion on behalf of Councillor Brennan. And agenda item 12B, delegation from Dewar Grattan. We're adding a delegation from Leon Kay. And as well, an additional one that just came now, item 12A, we're removing it from this evening's agenda, BC Coast Pilot's presentation. They were unable to attend, so we will be contacting them to come to a future meeting. And that's it.
So straight 12A.
Yes, please.
Okay. We have a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Besser, seconded by Councillor Coe. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Can we have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the July 24th meeting, please? Moved by Councillor Besser, seconded by Councillor Coe. Discussion, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is presentation from Mr. Richard Harding, Director of Parks and Recreation, will be introducing the Harbour City Football Club. Mr. Jason Coates, President of Harbour City Football Club, will provide an overview of the Harbour City Football Club as well as amenities and development opportunities at Devon Park Fields. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Worship. It's pleased to have Harbour City Football Club come do a presentation today. It's what we've liked to do over the years is have groups, especially large groups like Harbour City Football, introduce themselves to council and the services that they provide. For those who know much about Harbour City Soccer, it's close to 2,000 members, very active group. Do a number of things that we believe are active for life, sport development, and we've been talking for a while about some improvements that they want to do. We thought it was time that they come and present council about what they are doing as an organization, and then some direction from the council, possibly looking at some improvements in the Devon Park area. So Jason Coates is the president, who has a small presentation for you. Thank you, Richard.
Well, my thanks for having us. Thank you to the council. Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Jason Coates. I'm the president of the Harbour City FC Football Club. Football in this case means soccer. I'm also a parent. I'm also a coach. And I brought some reinforcements with me today. At the back, I've got Maddie Dawson. She's one of our youth coaches. She's also trained right here in Nanaimo. She's come up through the club the whole way, and now she actually works for the club as a youth coach specializing in the youngest age groups. I also have Mr. Blumentrath, Michael Blumentrath. He's one of our board members who's specifically charged with helping us with the field and facilities division. Joel Butler is our administrator. He's here for support, and he keeps me going in the right direction. And then I've got Dara Fitzgerald, who's our technical lead, who helps lead the club in our vision. And ultimately, our vision is soccer for life. We are all about how do we use soccer as a vehicle for creating an active lifestyle. We start with kids, but we hope that it carries over into adults. There's no question that it's easy to find data. There's probably organizations here in town. There's any number of academic institutions that help us understand that the benefits of being active are countless. So some of the obvious ones are fitness. Some of the less obvious ones are life at home, success in school, success later in life. So this is the why that soccer and active for life is so important. How do we do it? Well, right now we focus on youth age 3 to 18 years old. So if you're a youth age 3 to 18, we've got a place for you to play soccer. We have a year-round program. Some people think that we only play soccer in the coastal season, so from September to March, but at Harbour City you can play soccer 12 months of the year in a variety of ways. We have a hybrid structure. And so by hybrid, I mean we have some paid staff and we have a number of volunteers, hundreds of volunteers. But we have 5 paid staff, 2 full-time and 3 part-time, and they operate year-round. All of our operations are centered around the Lions Park Pavilion, but we use fields throughout Nanaimo. So from the far south end all the way to the north end. Whether they're turf, whether they're grass, we're prepared to use them. When we play soccer, when we think active for life, it's about the player. So we don't worry so much about teams. We don't worry so much about a particular point in time. We try to worry about the player and the long-term health and the long-term development of that player. We think a lot about physical literacy. So this is actually a picture taken just last week, and it's some of our older players doing yoga. And the idea, again, is to think beyond the soccer pitch and how do we keep them active for life. Teach them some skills that will be of benefit to any sport. We embrace multi-sport. So while I'm here talking about soccer, most of us play different sports, or most of us do different activities. And as a club, we embrace that. We're not interested in just thinking about one sport, but we are interested in using it as a vehicle for keeping people active and perhaps getting into other sports. And we embrace coach and referee development. So I've been involved in the club for the last 4 years. In that time, no coach and no referee has had to pay for any development or any course. We've been able to fund those coaches and those referees. The referees, interesting enough, are our kids. They're anywhere from 12 to 18 years old, and they serve as the referees for all the other kids. And so they become a real resource as we go through and we talk about, again, Active for Life. How do we do it? Pretty simple. We have a core soccer program that runs from September to March. We have some specialized training for really keen and committed kids that runs in 3 different periods from September to June. We play some spring soccer, which is just about playing, which is April to June. We have drop-in soccer, which turned out to be one of our most successful programs. So what we've done is we've said every Thursday during the summer, come and play soccer for free. We cover the cost of the field, and as long as you're registered at one of our clubs, you can play soccer. And so it's really not about whether they can pay, it's whether they want to play. And that's what we've had tremendous success this summer in the first season. And then we run some soccer camps throughout the season as well. Maybe a quick question. Has anybody been to one of our tournaments before? So we've got quite a few people. So that's a picture 3 years ago at the Mini World Cup. So 106 teams from all over the North Island, and that is on Bevan 4 fields. So we run that tournament on a cycle every 8 years. But we also run other tournaments throughout the year. And so most of those tournaments are held right on the Bevan 4 Fields Park. They include people from Ladysmith all the way up to Campbell River and farther north, but they often include Victoria teams, Lower Mainland, even farther. There's a team in that picture somewhere from the Yukon. We're also involved in our community. Some of you may have seen us at the recent Hope for Health events. We had a fantastic refugee event with the Syrian refugees. It was in the driving rain. It was welcome to Nanaimo, but it was really well attended. And again, there's a couple pictures I hope coming up. We were involved in the Woodgrove Toy Drive, and we were involved in the recent Active for Life Expo. So again, it's not just about soccer. The reality is we are the largest soccer club on the island, and we're one of the largest in the province. A lot of people don't realize that. They assume that it's a club in Victoria. I don't have the stats, but I'm going to say that we are the largest sporting organization, single sporting organization on the island. We've sort of anecdotal evidence that we are, but I didn't want to put it up there unless I knew for sure. So the reality is that we have 2,000 paying members. So members that sign up to register for one of our programs. 1,985 registered players. In a regular season, we play 1,528 games. 716 of those games are refereed. And when I say refereed, again, it's refereed by our kids, by your grandkids, by your friends' kids. 200 volunteers, most of those are coaches. So again, many of us that are on the board are coaches, but 200 plus volunteers. And again, 5 employees. So if you take all that, that is more than 3 million hours of physical activity. I put it in red because I was astounded when I saw the number. More than 3 million hours of physical activity in a year just from the participants of our club. So imagine for a second that you take every player that shows up on a Saturday. We run our main soccer program every Saturday on the Bevan 4 fields. Imagine if the soccer player shows up, mom or dad or a guardian shows up, if every second Saturday Grandpa John shows up, and if every third Saturday Aunt Betty shows up, and then every once in a while you have a sibling or two, that equals, on any given Saturday from September to March, 3,780 people that walk across that field every single Saturday. So they may not be there for the whole day, but many of them are there multiple times because they have more than one kid. Many of them are there just because the concession's so good, so they come and they stick around and they have a bowl of chili or they have some hot chocolate. But that's a small estimate. If a family shows up with 4 people or 5 people, they've kind of blown my estimate out of the water, and that number now goes over 4,000 people in a day from 9 to 4 o'clock. So the numbers are huge, but this poses a challenge for us. You can imagine that a grass field in a coastal season starts to become well-worn after 4,000 people have walked across it. This is a picture of a typical Saturday, what it looks like. So at any given hour, you'll see again, approximately 300 or 400 people on the field. The grass is nice and green because this picture was taken at the beginning of the year. And that's a picture of what the fields look like after a month or 2 of use. And that's a nice dry day, but you can see that the wear has started, and we're already starting to have some challenges with the field. But they're still out there and they're playing soccer. It's fantastic. This is a picture taken in the spring at the Syrian refugee event. So it was in we'll call it a minor monsoon, but it's taken at Merle Logan. And so you can see the wind was howling, the rain was pouring, but they were playing soccer, they were having fun, and they were able to do it because the fields were open, because they were all-weather turf fields. What does it look like? The challenges, I guess, between natural turf and artificial turf. So Harbor City FC right now, in the fall, uses Bevan 4 fields for 10 hours a week. We have our soccer Saturday, we have some games on Sunday, and on occasion we'll have a practice before it gets dark. There are no other users during the winter, unless there's the odd ad hoc user, but there are no other regular users. Regular closures happen as a result of field conditions. So not weather, it's okay if it's raining, but if it's been raining a lot and the field is really wet, we have to close the field. So that field is now closed. Those 3,780 people cannot go on the field. Merle Logan artificial turf, just one field, we use a minimum of 35 or 33.5 hours a week. So right now we book it and we rent it for a minimum of 33.5 hours. Rare closures, last winter was an exception, but rarely is it ever closed. And the second we're off it, there's adult groups on it, there's lacrosse teams on it, there's baseball in the spring, there's a lot of different users that can use it. So that's just our time, but other users are using it as well. So what's our vision? So our vision is, as a club, we've been talking about it for a number of years, but our vision is to have a lit artificial field turf at the Bevan 4 fields. So at the center of our operations, where we have all of our kids, all of our families, we'd like to add that capacity so we can continue to operate that Soccer Saturday. And it's important that I point out that while Soccer Saturday is happening, we have teams from 9 to 5 o'clock at Merle Logan and the second artificial turf. And we have teams at other fields throughout the city. So this isn't really about saying that now we're going to stop using those fields. We're really talking about how do we use the field that right now is very central, as well as the fields that we're currently using. So we see this as a first step in a long-term, perhaps multi-phase approach to a Bevan 4 fields complex that accommodates multiple sports, multiple users in all weathers. So not just soccer, but again, how do we make this a facility that is going to benefit all the kids, all the adults, and keep them active for life. We'd also like to, down the road, develop Lions Park Pavilion as a hub for sports. Again, sports, not just soccer, and activity for youth and adults. We are currently putting about $40,000 in renovations to the inside, paint, some furniture, potentially new flooring, things like that. So we're really invested in the building, and we'd like to work with the city to make it as a hub for activity going forward. We'd like to consider some additions to Murray Logan because we use it so much, and often we run into problems where there's not enough change rooms and the boys are going into the girls and the girls are going into the boys, and it becomes a real challenge. And then some storage because, again, at any given time, we may have 80 kids on each of those fields, and so we have a real challenge. So we would ask the Nanaimo City Council to direct staff to work with Harbour City to develop the Bevan Park Fields area and to come back to the council with some improvement options and costs. What can we do? Specific areas would be installing artificial turf and lights so that we can use it, especially in the fall and the winter. Perhaps in a phased approach, perhaps all at once. And to consider adding additional change rooms or storage capacity at Murray Logan, and perhaps in a creative way that is very cost effective. As a club, we're prepared to commit our resources, and our resources are our time, but we're also committed to adding some money to the pot, if you will. So we've got $425,000 that we would like to use in this conversation and as we talk about these initiatives so that we can work collaboratively with the city, perhaps with other sporting organizations, to come up with an option that will serve those 3,780 every Saturday users, plus the adults, plus the other kids, plus the people that use it in their free time. My thanks.
We'll see if we have any questions. Okay, questions for the delegation? Councilor Vesser.
Thank you. Jason, personally, compliments to you and all of your membership. Secondly, thank you for the succinct presentation. I don't know, I don't like to speak to people, but thanks for the presentation. And particularly in so much as the hours of use and the increased hours of use that are available when we start to think of different services. So I'm only going to ask you actually one question, and you must have some thoughts and ideas of the timeline for improvements in which order. Is that something that you just like me to wait to see what comes back from staff with a direction from council to work with you on bringing forward a report to council, or is that something that you'd like to share today?
Well, it's a great question. We've definitely had early conversations, both as a club and sort of dream the dream visions. I think, and I hope I'm not speaking, I hope I'm not saying it out of order, but if we were to think of the first stage being a single lit field in front of the Bevan Park Fieldhouse, that would be the first stage. And then looking at how would we then use the rest of the space. And again, I think thinking creatively about other sports and multi-use. We think that concurrently we could add some simple change room capacity and storage at Murray Logan. So I suppose that would be our first, a single lit field and some form of additional change room and storage at Murray Logan. And then the second phase and perhaps a third phase would be how do we expand that first phase at Bevan Park.
Thank you very much.
Others? Councilor Yocum?
Thank you, Jason, and your club for the support and being a co-founder of Open Health and being flexible with our date change
No worries.
that we did this year, but because of Carl Robinson. But anyways, it worked. So anyways, being down in Murray Logan and being when we have those guys over, the Caps, I definitely look forward to supporting, not just because they're professionals, but actually all your teams that use it. Definitely the changing facility because we have nowhere to put the players with those in public.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand what the club needs to be down in Murray Logan. But also up top as well, I look forward to where we can be, where I can get support about upstairs, up top,
Yeah.
the grass fields and the turf fields. Because you look at even as the early last month, we did open house in Musqueam, and it's Musqueam's not a city, and their facilities by far exceeds ours. So I look forward to Musqueam's running us out of the ballpark. We gotta get up to speed here in a city of nearly 100,000 to get up to the time. So I look forward to the staff, and we hope we get that far and go forward, because I get it, and I definitely will be looking forward to seeing all the numbers. But I hear what you guys got to do, and I look forward to being a support. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jason, very much for the presentation. Thanks for coming today and filling us in. Soccer has always been such an important sport in this city, and it's good to get an update every once in a while on how things are going. And I know every sport has its ups and downs, and as a former coach and referee and executive member on youth soccer, I know it hasn't always been easy, but I think you really have things on the right track now. I really appreciate the steps you've made in terms of making the sport more inclusive, the Little Kickers program, things like that you've done. So I really applaud you for that. And I must also compliment your office manager, Mr. Butler, because anytime I have questions about local soccer, he's very quick to help and fill me in. My question is the concept of artificial turf on the Bevan Four Field complex. I think artificial turf is the way of the future. It's the way to go. But you mentioned about multi-sport usage, and I'm just wondering how this would impact the other user groups that are currently on the fields, and have you had any talks with them about your vision?
There's no question that there are other users on the field, both baseball, or I guess technically it's called fastball. There are other, I'd call them ad hoc users, so people that drop in, although from my experience, most of those have been soccer. So one of the things that we did when we started looking at potential ideas, and Joel, the administrator, came up with some great pictures of examples where within a complex you have things like baseball diamonds built into the turf, and so they're artificial turf, but the lines are drawn on the field so that it can be used as well. The benefit of that is it's all weather. It is a little different, but it's been very successfully done in a number of places in the States and even now in Canada. So that's becoming more and more common. We haven't specifically spoken with baseball at this point. We have spoken with Nanaimo United, who is the adult team in town, and we have spoken with the Seven-a-Side Soccer League, and they both have given us letters of support. And so we've started that process, definitely a long way to go. And I think there'd be a lot of opportunity to bring those users together when we start talking about how the whole space looks. And I think there's all kinds of neat ideas about multi-court, and I mean, I even saw that article about pickleball, and so I think there's a lot of great, to me, exciting conversations that we could have. And can we keep this field rocking for 12 hours a day? I think that would be the key. And we can't do that by ourselves. That's going to take multi-sport. So we're definitely open to that.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, just one final comment. If anybody in the room has not been by the Bevan Four Field complex during youth soccer season on a Saturday morning, I really encourage people to go and have a look. It's just a fantastic jamboree atmosphere. Kids all over the fields, parents having fun, having a great time. Thank you.
Maybe I'll just make one comment. You mentioned the Little Kickers. The Little Kickers, if you've got a kid that is 3 or 4, the Little Kickers is the program. That program has grown just this registration year by over 30%. So we had 100 last year, we're already over 130. We are one of the only clubs on the island where our numbers are growing. Across BC soccer right now, in 1 year alone, the numbers of soccer players dropped 2% across BC. 2% in 1 year. I mean, that's shocking. Right? And that's just soccer. Unfortunately, it's common among all sports. But Harbour City is growing, and I think it is a real testament to a lot of the work our staff are doing and the board and the volunteers.
Great, good for you. Thank you.
Mr. Holm.
Thank you for your presentation, Jason. Just a question. I don't know if you can answer it or not, or if you keep the stats, but where do your members come from? The question, the reason I ask, is this strictly the city of Nanaimo, Or are we looking at area A, area C, and other areas which we have agreement with the regional district in those areas to help pay for some of these fields? I hope
Yep.
that we can recover some of our costs and contribute to, to the members that live in those areas to come pay their fair share. So my question to you is where are your members residing?
So our members generally reside in the greater Nanaimo area.
Well, the regional district in Nanaimo,
The
I
regional
understand.
district.
But again, there's areas in Nanaimo, right?
I don't have stats about the specific areas, but I can tell you that in terms of users of the field, Joel, if we were to pick a percentage on any given Saturday, what percentage are not from the regional district of Nanaimo? What percentage of teams and players are not from? And when I say not from, so as soon as you hit U10 at the recreation level, we run a regional league. And so that means we have teams from Ladysmith all the way up to Qualicum Beach and all the way over to Gabriola. So on any given Saturday, there would be 20 teams. Is that a good number?
Or,
So non-regional district in Nanaimo.
oh, yeah, it'd be very few. The percentage of actual Nanaimo it's got to be like 90%.
90% Nanaimo, 10% elsewhere. Although interestingly, because our facilities and because our organization has grown, we've recently been contacted by the BC Premier League, which is primarily based in the Lower Mainland, to run a series of games here. So in late September, our goal is to now run a series of games where 4 teams from Burnaby come here to play, and it's because of our facilities. But going forward, we could get those numbers.
Yeah, like I said, I get that we get tourism from outside Nanaimo. I'm just more interested in regional district Nanaimo. Like
Okay.
you mentioned Gabriola.
Yep.
So they're an area and part of the regional district,
You bet.
right?
Yeah.
And area E and A, which is Cedar and all the other
Yeah.
areas. Those are the numbers which we're really interested in understanding it is who from the outside the actual city uses that if you
Okay.
have stats.
We could do that by school. Yeah.
If I could just add, it's what Councilor Humps talked about is our regional contribution area.
Yes.
Right.
So every 5 years we do a survey, and
Yes.
the clubs provide us all those numbers. And so the regional district did a survey 2 years ago, I believe. And so we can have those numbers there, but they're definitely part of that. And one field on Cape Rolla, which pays into we kind of, it's a minus because they maintain that field. But they go into it. It's only for operating, doesn't really count, but it's for operating the sports fields, arenas, and some recreation centers.
It's a good question. We can get those numbers.
Okay.
Thank you. Others, council? Okay, I would like to, I've got a couple questions for you. Every time you say any given Sunday, I think I'm going to see Al Pacino start a speech. Is Nanaimo FC the exclusive user of Lions Pavilion? Can you remind me?
We have, right now, we share the storage space with the Fastball Association, and they also use our boardroom once or twice a month at this stage. On occasion, the BIX will use the facility. On occasion, other organizations will rent it at a whopping total of $50 a day. BC Soccer just used it. Some other examples, again, ad hoc users that are one-off, but that's really the sum right there who currently uses the pavilion. Our staff are located there 5 days a week, 6 days a week during the soccer season. So we have 2 or 3 of them there in the offices every day.
Your statistics don't surprise me much to pick up in some of our programs in Parks and Rec. And I have to say, just for anybody who doesn't know, the activity guide came out 7 days ago or 8 days ago. There's been over 4,000 registrations in the first 7 days. Staff's been overwhelmed.
That's great to hear.
Registrations were very, very much a participatory community.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. I guess I've got nothing more for you other than just say thank you for coming today and giving council an update. So as opposed to what I've experienced in the past, where a group like yours is off in a corner somewhere, developing a long-term strategic plan, and we know nothing about it. And then, some folks in Parks and Rec might know about it, but we certainly don't. So the fact that we're able to plug in your plans to a long-term capital plan for Parks and Rec is very, very helpful. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Or do we have to do a motion anymore?
No. Thank you. So the next item is administration. Seeing none, next item is community services. And the first item is 8A, Buttertubs Marsh Conservation Area Management Plan Update, to be introduced by Mr. Richard Hardy.
Thank you, Your Worship. If you're going to council to deal with the presentation before we all left, or is that going to be at the end of the?
And is there a recommendation that we do something?
There was at the end of his presentation directing staff to work with him to come back.
Okay, so we've talked about this before with all due respect. We don't take recommendations from outside organizations.
No, they didn't
We can do it as other business, if the council wishes to. Yep.
I'm happy to do it now, so that the folks that are here for this, they've all done.
Yeah, that's okay.
Everybody's done?
Yep.
Okay. So is there somewhere on the agenda that's
Other business?
other business arising?
Use it for that, so.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Hart.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that, confusing it up. Very pleased, though, council, to bring this forward to you. Remember a few years ago when council authorized the joint purchase of West Marsh, give us opportunity to work with our long-term partners, with Nature's Trust and Ministry of Environment, to develop an overall management plan for Buttertubs Marsh and the West Marsh and the two other properties to bring them into one overall management plan. I do have a letter, before we get started, a letter that came in late of support from Ducks Unlimited, which we'll pass around. Rob's got a little presentation, get more background on it, but again, this is a culmination again of council by purchasing this property a term ago, and then allowing us to work on this management plan and bring it all that natural area. I'll turn it over to Rob. He has a presentation.
And it's relatively brief and really just to kind of hit some high points. But this is a property that's had a legacy of conservation work done, but also a legacy of properties that have been purchased for conservation reasons, at least since the 1970s. So quite significant. And this is a good news story, I think, from the collaborative work that's been done over the years, from the Nature's Trust, Ducks Unlimited, the city, but also volunteers that have put in many, many hours of their time to work on the trail systems, on interpretation, and to make this the special place that it is. And it is a very popular walking network that many, many people use, sports clubs use, and it's something we want to enhance and improve into the future, but also protect that what makes this unique and special as a natural feature. And that's part of what this update is about, is to look at the existing plans that we had for the different properties, amalgamate them, see what we could do to kind of harmonize and basically apply throughout all the properties. Some of them city, some of them Ministry of Environment properties, and but all working together for conservation and also for the opportunity for the public to appreciate and get close to this unique feature. So just as a little bit of a background, everyone, I believe, knows where Buttertubs is. It's very close to downtown. It's a 55-hectare wetland, riparian wetland complex that many, many years ago, to my understanding, was a series of farm fields that the coal mining companies had used, but slowly has been reclaimed and naturalized, I believe beginning in the 1970s. Very ecologically rich area, many species there, birds, amphibians, mammals, and a lot of work being done by different groups to inventory them, research them, study them, and also it's really recognized as an important area for research. And one particular project I do want to highlight that council has given us the permission to pursue is doing a research with other cities across Canada on defining what a municipal natural capital assessment could do, or what it would be in a place like this, so that we can have a better understanding from the economic side what the true value of natural areas like these wetlands are and what they contribute to the city. This is just a very high-level overview of some of the infrastructure, but there's a series of water mains, sewer lines underneath. This management plan does not apply to that clearly, but there's also a strong network, trail network, particularly on the east side of the property. And as I was saying earlier, very popular area for many people to use and utilize.
Sorry to interrupt you, just so some may not know the difference in both. It's always Butter Tubs and then what added.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I'm just going to take the mic because I don't have a laser pointer. But the East Marsh, this is the original conservation area that was purchased in the 1970s here. In 2012, as Richard had mentioned, the West Marsh, which is right here, was purchased. And there's an agreement currently with Ducks Unlimited on the management of that. Now, there is a city park here, Valley Oak Park here. There's also a riparian area along the Millstone just off of Pride Avenue, but also a small piece here that the city owns off Buttertubs Drive. So as I say, there's a network of properties with different titles on them. So the work with Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Trust, and the Friends and Buttertubs did a fairly thorough assessment of the existing plans, but also we hired consultants to help us define some management regions, which this map illustrates, but basically outlines the area of the conservation area that we'd like to see this plan apply to. And as I mentioned, the partnership several times, but it's definitely a partnership where each group's expertise and knowledge come into bearing depending on the issue. For the city, it's been primarily trails management and advice on management on trails and interpretive signage and parks-related issues, but the Nature Trust, Ducks Unlimited, and the province have used their expertise as well on the other management features such as the
Painted turtle.
Yeah, the painted turtle, for example, because of it's a rare red-listed species, they brought in the expertise to develop a management plan and helped implement some of the work that was done to try and create a sustainable habitat for the turtles there. And that's a good example. So the new plan, the overarching goals is clearly to monitor, maintain, and where possible enhance the natural ecosystems that we have defined in that earlier map I pointed out, continue to support public recreational and educational use, and maintain the co-management approach that we've had over the years with Ducks Unlimited and the Nature Trust. And some priority actions clearly being restoration, and you mentioned the turtles. A lot of work recently has been going on there, but there's also been some past work on other species as well. But there's a lot of work to do on invasive plant management, looking for doing more work along the Millstone riparian area to enhance that, particularly in the West Marsh area, and to maintain the open water habitat that is on the east side, and that's a future project to happen in the next few years, just to maintain that open water habitat area. On the research side, we've had some great partnerships with Vancouver Island University and other universities actually as well, and we want to try and continue to build on that relationship, have them much more involved in the management, but also encourage their participation, particularly in the West Marsh area, where there's a field school now that's being used, I think, for the last 5 years or so. Then on the public education side, I think we could do much more on translating the information and knowledge learned from the research side and getting that much more available for the public to see and understand. So we hope through interpretive programs, events like a Marsh Day, which is what we did last fall, maybe more work online to provide the information that we've collected over the years, have that available for the public to see and enjoy and appreciate the wetland ecosystem and the unique situation and the unique place that it really is, and have that available for everyone to see. And obviously to continue that partnership to manage the existing infrastructure, the trails, the platform, the viewing platforms, and any kind of restoration work as well, is sharing those expenses, sharing that expertise into the future. Now that's just a very brief overview. I understand we have Tom Reed here, who's the manager for the Nature Trust for the Lands Program. He might add a few more details as well. Thank you.
Worship Council, thanks for the invitation, Rob, Richard. I don't have any slides, but I just wanted to build on the background with the Nature Trust and Ducks Unlimited. Just for background purposes, I'm the West Coast Conservation Land Manager for the Nature Trust of BC and Ducks Unlimited Canada, and my region covers Vancouver Island, Central Coast, and Haida Gwaii. And one of the key things that we looked at when we do our acquisitions and management is the development of partnerships with local municipalities, with stewardship groups, fish and game clubs, other smaller public agencies and whatnot. And on the island, one of the best relationships we've had for over 20 years or 25 years now is with the City of Nanaimo, working with Parks and Rec staff, environment staff, and at Buttertubs Marsh, and that includes, as Rob mentioned, invasive species work, species at risk work, inventory, restoration, acquisitions, and working with Friends of Buttertubs Marsh and other community interest groups in the area. And as Rob mentioned with VIU, that bird banding station that they operate is utilized pretty much 6 months of the year, and they've banded thousands of birds, and that contributes to an international study on the migratory movements of birds and what birds are present and breeding in Nanaimo. And we also monitor other migratory birds like waterfowl and nesting behaviors. And one of the interesting, there was a photograph up there, success stories at Buttertubs recently has been with the western painted turtle. We've done a lot of inventory and research with Environment Canada and the province about nesting behaviors, and we've actually constructed nesting beaches there. And this year specifically, we've had a huge successful nesting in the area, and we've got some actually remote cameras there that are monitoring. So there is some images that we can distribute through with the city about successful nesting behaviors. And there's also underground cameras we use to monitor nesting success as well. As Rob mentioned recently, for the last couple of years, we just, with the old previous management plan, one of the keys was that we review the management plan every 5 years to see how we've done, what has been successful, where do we need to improve. So for the last 18 months, we've worked with our partners, the city, myself, the province, Ducks Unlimited, and the Friends of Buttertubs and the public to assess how we've done, where are we going. And I'm here today. Doug Jans, our director of the Nature Trust, couldn't make it. But to fully endorse from my program and my partners side of thing, the management plan that's been developed in partnership, and look forward to the next 5 years and beyond with the City of Nanaimo and implementing multiple strategies for restoration and inventory and support the Municipal Natural Capital Initiative. I think that's pretty much from our end. It's, like I said, one of the most successful partnerships we have on Vancouver Island with the City of Nanaimo, and we'd like to see that continue moving forward. Thank you.
Questions? Councilor Besser.
Thank you, Rob and Tom. An excellent presentation. I'm delighted to see the ecological benefits that are emerging since the 70s of the acquisitions. Terrific acquisitions, in my opinion, and of course also for the stormwater restoration and everything else that it contributes to the environment. So a quick question for me, speaking with a couple of very park users that are there, I would say, every day, and their concern that they raised with me was that for nesting reptiles or otherwise that may not be far off trail. And with the activities and so much activity, people going off trail quite a bit now, whether or not there's any ability to be more protective of the nesting areas or compliance or conservation of signages or taping areas off, or similar to extinct mammals in the ocean that find themselves beached and don't touch, don't go near. It's such an education embedded in certain cultures. Are we experiencing disturbances that we may not have before, but we're realizing now the abilities that we have with cameras and otherwise? Are we getting better at that, or are we just, we're getting better at identifying that, we've got a problem with the encroachments?
Yeah, I think at Butter Tubs, it's a challenge that we deal with on all our conservation lands, is the wanting to promote the experience of getting people outside to learn about their natural environment and the natural world and ecosystems and the goods and services, while balancing the reason why we conserved it and protected for the fish and wildlife habitat. And at Butter Tubs, the strategic acquisition of West Marsh has really helped in terms of balancing that. The east side's got all the trail users, there's a lot of trail, that's where the majority of the people are, whereas the West Marsh at this point doesn't have a lot of trail development. It's at the VIU bird banding station, but it's providing a sanctuary, if you will, a large sanctuary away from the other spot. At the east side, where we do have the nesting behavior, we have done some strategic fencing and some signage, and like any city park or area, you get vandalism and people that just, for lack of a better term, don't understand the sign that says please stay out. We do have a very active Friends of Butter Tubs Marsh. I'm sure people have interacted with them out there that are more than willing to educate people on what they're doing. We have worked with the Conservation Officer Service in the province to have more frequent patrols, recognizing their limitations with resources and everything else. And recently, I think it was off of Bird Sanctuary Drive or Butter, I can't remember which side, we did relocate a trail completely. Butter Tubs Drive is part of, there was an infrastructure upgrade project that happened. So we relocated an entire trail away from the main beach area. So that's been wholly protected and redirected people around. And we do have new interpretive signs we'll be putting up as well moving forward. And it's a balance. I know from the Nature Trust side of things, we want to maintain the open access for people to come and respectfully enjoy the property, and we're always trying to make sure that it's an educated use of the property, and with more and more species at risk and these habitats becoming more vulnerable, it's something we got to look at more strategic fencing and rerouting trails around while not diminishing the enjoyment of the area.
Thanks very much.
Other questions? Councilor Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. I think we're extremely fortunate to have this very unique ecosystem here in Nanaimo. A couple of questions, probably more for Rob or Richard. In terms of management, I guess I'm assuming it would be fair to say there'll be a much different level of access for the Butter Tubs side as compared to the West Marsh side. Much more usage on the original site compared to the newer section. Is that in the plan?
Yeah, Rob can add to that, but I'll just say that we want to have some. The neat thing about the West Marsh is that we can actually plan it, those accesses well in advance of where, if we wanted to have some access in there, we don't have, people aren't in there now, so it's one of the rare parts we've ever bought that we haven't already had existing uses. So right now, we didn't have any existing uses until the bird banding, and that's been controlled. So with there are some plans to add some access, but it's not right away, and it'll be more controlled aspect.
And in the meantime, there's research going on now, partly through VIU and others, to better understand the more sensitive areas of where they are in the West Marsh, so that when the day does come that we want to talk about access, we know the more appropriate route to kind of steer away from any sensitive areas. But it's early days still. There's a lot we don't know there. While the field school's been working there quite consistently, I think there's more work to be done to kind of be clear where the least sensitive areas are for any kind of trail development.
And just on like talking about guiding people, so that picture right there, that's an example of how we guided people away from the existing trail. That's the kind of way to try to get people to move away. We did this at Neck Point. as at Jack Point, been successful in those parks, doing some of those things. It's constant, but as a add on to Westman's question, a lot of it is education. We've got to continue to educate people why we're doing it, and we're not just trying to take away their dog walk or their running track. It's a we have to keep understand why we're doing it.
Yeah, I'm going to underscore that because I think that's the biggest lesson we learned, is that there's a lot of work done, but it's held up in reports and studies, and it's not as accessible as it could be. We need to do a better job of, maybe it's through programming, maybe it's through other ways of having conveying the information about what is there and why this is unique, and make sure the public has a better understanding of that. And there's lots of ways I think we can creatively come and tell that story, but we just haven't got to that point yet. But I think that's the thing this plan helps provide some direction on.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, in terms of setting the rules of usage, is that a collaborative process with the city, Ducks Unlimited, and so on? And what is can you just comment on the role of the volunteer group, Friends of Buttertubs Marsh? Are they still actively involved, or what is their role?
Want to speak to it?
Yeah, with the rules or regulations, there is a lot of partners that are represented on the committee, and so we do work cooperatively on what are the concerns and how the best to manage and approach it. So we do have the conservation officers, I know, working with Richard and Rob. Bylaws sometimes has gotten involved, and we're trying to have a consistent message of acceptable uses throughout, and that's something that the plan does address moving forward. The Friends of Buttertubs Marsh, previously Nanaimo Field Naturalists, and we've had volunteers there ever since we acquired the property. And their role as it stands now is they have weekly invasive species polls. They work with, I have summer students and field staff that work with them. They just help us implement restoration projects. They do user surveys and number counts, and they're usually out there 2 or 3 times a week and communicating with the neighbors and engaging people. And they're a tremendous resource that we have that we can't be available every day throughout. So they do quite a lot. Probably there's about 15 active people, and they put in hundreds of hours a year working in the area.
Just want to add, though, it's not a major aspect, but there is a difference in jurisdiction. So we don't own Buttertubs Marsh. We help maintain it and manage it. But the Ministry of Environment has the lease with Nature Trust. Nature Trust is the owner of that property, whereas the city owns all the other property, which is dedicated parkland. This is actually its own parkland also, but it is actually not owned by the city, it's owned by Nature Trust. But we work with this together. So that's where you may see some different signage. Sometimes you'll see Ministry or UBC Park signage, and sometimes you'll see our signage on there. But actual owner is Nature Trust for that property, and the city in combination with Ducks Unlimited and the corporate programs.
Thank you. And if I may, Chair, just one more point related to that, Richard. The question I've had asked, and that is, people comment as they're driving into town on the parkway, they look down onto this area and they see very little blue water. What they see is a lot of light green grass, the reeds. And I've been asked, is this healthy, this ingrowth of all of the reeds? And maybe it is, I don't know. And if not, who's responsible for culling that?
So the interesting thing is they're islands of cattail basically, and they move around in the wind. And so in a high wind event with a higher water, buttertubs will change through the day from up above looking at this, so you'll see it move. You know, I know we've got a couple of time-lapse photographs where you can actually see it move over the day. Sometimes 20, 30 meters, these islands will move. The East Marsh is a controlled wetland. There is a water control structure that Ducks Unlimited we maintain. And so the water level is set at a certain elevation, and what happens is, so we retain the water.
The water control structure here. And so these are the little islands that move. This will move this way, and these will float around. They're free floating.
And it just, as when summer and the higher temperatures come through natural evaporation and draw down to the wetland, that's why it starts to look a bit drier. And you'll get the natural cattail. Like, there are some invasive species we've been tackling in there, like purple loosestrife and yellow flag iris, and we've done pretty well with those. But as it draws down, it does create the woody vegetation or habitat that amphibians need to nest on, and they attach their egg masses to it. And then nesting waterfowl will nest in the drawn down floating island area. Then as the winter rains come, it starts to trap in more water and store that water, and that's part of what the natural capital study's been looking at, is how much water can buttertubs store over the winter. So throughout the course of the year, the water levels will change just based on, like, we haven't had rain since beginning of June basically, and so it will draw down. And what people are seeing is just that emergent vegetation growing up and the water level drawing down, but it's not a bad thing.
And then just on the West Marsh, for everyone knows, so if we're prior to us purchasing it, this meeting, so this farm, mainly because of the dike here that helps drain this wetland. So one of the things that the men are trying to look at is, do we close that off? Do we start opening up water back up in here? And those are the kind of management things that we're going to studies with. So that way, because there is opportunities, and I think that that's a little bit interesting, is can we open up more water here? Or is it already a thing? So right now we haven't been cutting it. Last few years we allowed the hawthorn to come in, but we may need to go back in and actually do some work when we try and do other ways to open this up. We also think in the sense of flood control and things like that, there's some opportunity of doing it here, opening this area up for more. So again, it's an amazing piece to have, and there's lots of opportunities. Again, those partnerships, all the other things will help us look at those issues.
Thank you very much.
There's got a couple questions. I'm still confused on this ownership of the east side.
Sure.
It's owned by the province and it's leased to Nature Trust.
So the Nature Trust of BC owns the East Marsh, and and then they've leased it to the province for just long-term management stuff, so they can use provincial resources like conservation officers and whatnot.
Okay, great, thank you. So for staff, I've got there's a management plan. I didn't see a lot of financial impacts on attached to the plan. Is there a plan to come forward and give us some guidance on what we need to put aside for resources over the next 10 years for the maintenance, for the enhancement, for recovery, for upgrades over the next 10 years?
It's a longer term answer, but one of the things with the management plan was it helps us with our other partners to start deciding, okay, what are some of those big priorities? And so most of this type of natural area, it's not operating, that's the cost, it's when we decide to do a project. So for example, if we decided to open up the West Marsh to more water, it would be a one-time larger project that we work with our partners on and come back to council and see what would be our contribution. Same with, for example, a number of years ago we had to update the water control structure, and Doug's and Nature's Trust did most of it, but we contributed some. So again, I don't have a complete answer for you on that one. You're looking, sorry. If we get more to a point where we want to do a number of things in the West Marsh, we may come back with some pricing. Right now, there's not much operating to deal with the West Marsh. We've already doing the East Marsh. We've been operating for a number of years. There's no changes to that. So I'm sure that's not a great answer for you, but that's.
I would feel a lot more comfortable if, with all of the demands on resources for parks and rec, particularly with all the addition of new properties, new additions, that we develop some sort of budget so that we don't, 2 years out, get a single one-time request that's a significant amount of money. It's never been budgeted for. So I would certainly appreciate that if we look at that as part of the long-term plan, that it sure makes it a lot easier for us to do long-term strategic planning. Thank you. Any other questions for Council? Thank you.
I'll move staff recommendations.
So, there's a recommendation the Council receives and adopts the updated Buttertubs Marsh Conservation Area Management Plan. It's been moved and it's been seconded. Discussion. Is there any discussion? Okay. I just wanted to add to that while I'll support it, it's completely devoid of any budgets over the next 5 to 10 years. Councillor York.
Yeah, just quickly, I don't know, we haven't met for a while, but we discussed the added colliery dams, and tonight, I just wanted to be crystal clear from my seat. So these parks aren't a burden, it's a responsibility of the city, and it's good stuff. It's sort of feeling it's a negative tone to it. I don't know if it's your intent or not, but I don't view it as a negative, and you're right, we've got to budget responsibly. But this is positive conversation, and I look forward to enhancing this, Richard. It's great. Thank you.
Any others? I just wanted to respond that it was not intended to be negative, other than the fact that every time we acquire an asset, that we consider its long-term budgetary implications.
What did we just acquire?
Pardon me?
What did we acquire?
We acquired, in my term, we've
No,
acquired...
this conversation right now, what did we acquire?
We acquired Lindley Valley.
No, right now we're talking Butter Tubs. Did we just acquire Butter Tubs? No.
We acquired Lindley Valley. We acquired, we dedicated parkland recently. And I'll continue to say that we need to consider the long-term budgets when we do this. Councillor
I will
Russell.
support development.
I was just wishing to get to the subject matter of voting on the updated Buttercup Marsh Conservation Area Management Plan, and that's what I think that staff and the Nature's Trust and everybody that's involved in the preservation and protection of this place continues. And I heard 2 weeks ago at a meeting that our Parks and Recreation budget had been reduced the last 5 years, and all of these other anecdotal comments, which I met with our Director of Parks and Recreation as a result of that to receive confirmation that in fact our budget has not gone down in Parks, Recreation and Wellness, other than in the place where the Cultural Department has been moved out of the area of responsibility of Parks and Rec to another area, and a couple of line items of management staff that have gone with that or have not been replaced. What I heard our Director of Parks and Recreation say is that it's nominal. The costs associated with this operation is nominal, and it is a maintained park land that provides way more for us than just, we don't have to mow it. This is, in my mind, this is a great update and a very important update to the Buttertubs Marsh Conservation and Management Plan. I look forward to the vote.
Any other discussion? Councillor Ford.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely support the recommendation. You know, we do look at budgets, we do look at planning, but there are certain things that are far worth more than the money involved. You look at the volunteer opportunities, and not just for this, but for our last presentation, the volunteer opportunities that are out there, the educational opportunities, those to me are worth far more than dollars. And yes, by putting dollars in, we create more of those educational opportunities, but parks should be kept primarily in a natural state unless we want them for a specific reason. And that does not cost a lot of money to keep a park in its natural state. And this goes to the Greater Nanaimo Water District. And you don't have to put any money into that. There's already trails in there. It's, you know, you make it a park, it's a park. So I think too often we look at costs above the added benefit to us.
Any others? I just got another question for staff, and that is, we're going to be facing a lot of discussions coming up in the near future about accessibility for all of our citizens. As part of the Buttertubs plan, is the issue of accessibility for all of our citizens being dealt with?
So, luckily enough, the nice thing about Buttertubs Marsh is not limited. So it's actually a trail that's already used by different user groups. We have different buildings. But we cannot make all parks accessible. We try to make them as accessible as we can. But we do know that there are certain parks that, based on their terrain and other issues, that we can't make it accessible. So we try to work on different areas to make certain areas accessible, particularly playgrounds, some of our busier parks, our facilities, of course. By the time though, we actually have been able to do some accessible work on it just because of how level it is, which is not like our parks. So should that answer your question?
Thank you. So the motion has been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Geographic Information System Technology Plan. Mr. Brad McCray, Chief Operations Officer.
Thank you, Worship. I've got a little bit of work coming up here, so I'll just give everybody a second to make the transition.
Great.
So we get ready, Council. You receive a presentation this evening by Mr. David Holdstock and Mr. Curtis Hinton, representing Geographic Technologies Group, regarding the City of Nanaimo's GIS technology plan. As noted in previous presentations, GIS allows local government to visualize, question, analyze, and interpret data to understand relationships, patterns, and trends contained within location-based information. The City of Nanaimo has been using GIS technology since around the 1990s. Some of the current highlights include emergency dispatch, development application approvals, and evaluating infrastructure. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Holdstock and Mr. Hinton to provide a presentation.
Your Worship, Council, thanks very much for having us back to give you an update on the GIS technology plan. Before we get started, a couple of things. We call it a GIS technology plan, but it's really a geospatial science plan, I suppose. It's everything to do with geographic information systems and related technology. And I should start by saying a big thanks, because we're nearing completion on the project, a big thanks to the 130, 150 staff that have participated in this study. That said, what we want to do in the time allocated is just talk about the technology plan itself, talk about the methodology, which is, 3 phases, 7 steps. And then we do have a couple of videos we want to show you, which I'm hoping explains a little more about GIS. If we break the study down, it's really three projects in one. We start with a needs assessment, we then develop the system design, and then thirdly, we have the roadmap. This is no more than a roadmap. But the most important thing about this roadmap is it's enterprise in nature. It's sustainable, it's scalable, and it's enduring. So we hope that we've created a step-by-step roadmap for the city to follow. And it really is just those three phases. The 3 phases, is the phase 1, the needs assessment, phase 2, the system design, and phase 3. They're broken up into 7 steps. And I want to talk about these just to recap what we've done, because it's important, I think, for all of us to recognize who's been involved in all of this project. The first task really was an online questionnaire, which was administered to nearly 100 staff. And we asked a lot of questions about governance, about GIS in general, data and databases, software and things like that. The second phase, was the technology seminar. We went to the third step was the departmental interviews. 4th step was the needs assessment findings. So at that point, then we can move to alternative system design. And then from there, we can move into phase 3, which is the business plan and the actual strategic plan itself, the actual step-by-step roadmap for implementing GIS. So let's talk about phase 1 for a second, the questionnaire. Let's talk about this because it's important, because as part of any good technology plan, if it's going to work, we have to have, ground-up support for it. So we sent out a questionnaire to all staff, and we talked about what I call the 6 pillars of sustainability. GIS management. Tell me about GIS management. Tell me about data and databases. Tell me about interoperability. Tell me about the software and the infrastructure, and of course GIS training, education and knowledge transfer. So we asked those questions. In the end, we got a lot of results. We got a lot of results. First of all, we had 94 staff eagerly participate, not only in the questionnaire, but in the interview process. So it was very interesting. As you can see, I'll go through these fairly quickly because I'll summarize them. But you can see that 75% of the respondents are unaware of any strategic plan, that's been developed. That most city staff turn to another department for help with GIS. And then there's another one there is a split between whether there is, GIS responsibility, where it is. And we can go through all of these. I mean, one alarming thing was 64% of city staff have never attended a GIS user group. So there's some questions in all these statistics, questions and issues. And I won't spend a lot of time on them because I can summarize them here. What we found out, essentially, is 53% believe that there are no clear lines of responsibility. Now, that's a challenge in itself. That's a governance issue. That's a management challenge. 57% GIS activity does not align with the city's overall vision, and that's a problem, another management problem. 64% have never attended a GIS user group. 6 out of 10 was the rating for effectiveness of GIS management. 83% do not use mobile solutions. Everybody's using mobile solutions. That's the enterprise nature of GIS. 22% believe there is GIS data duplication. 65% do not use GIS for public engagement. 67% believe GIS integration can be improved. 75% are unaware of any standard operating procedures in GIS. 93% do not create metadata. 60% of respondents are unaware of any GIS training programs. 58% believe the department data layers need improvement. 50% never maintain digital data. 30% do not use GIS software. I read those out, and I won't dwell on them because we've embraced all of these facts. We've listened carefully to all the department directors, the departments, and everybody. And you come up, and what you end up doing is putting a profile together as where the city is at the moment. So the online questionnaire, we knew what was going on in the city before we even came on site, because this was an online questionnaire. The results came in, we produced the statistics. But then we had a technology seminar. We involved everybody, we engaged everybody, we informed everybody what this project was about, and we got a lot of feedback. So far, so good. Then we moved to step 3, the departmental interviews. So we went through, and I want council to know, we went through methodically interviewing each department by department and asked them specific questions. Now I'm going to stop here just for a second. What I've tried to do here in one board is summarize where the city is, because there's a lot of moving parts of this geospatial, technology. You can see in the top left-hand corner, that circle represents management. Management and coordination, governance. And you see the rating we've all come up with. We didn't come up with it, everybody came up with it. That's where we stand in the blue. We're not in a great situation with how GIS is managed. Then moving across, you can see with regards to data and databases, the city has good, accurate, reliable digital data. That's what costs a lot of money. That's the $10 million bag hidden somewhere. That's where it all is. That's the resource, okay? Then you move further across, and I call it interoperability. It's always procedures, workflow, and integration. How much are we integrating GIS with our databases? Not so much. And then you come down to the bottom, GIS software. We do have software. We have access to software. It's just not being used. Then you look at training, education, and knowledge transfer in the middle, and that's where the alarm bells go off. If we don't have training, education, and knowledge transfer, we don't have good management. They're the 2 greatest weaknesses the city is facing now. And then if you move further over on the bottom row, infrastructure. We're in a great place with infrastructure. So the software's going to run okay. We can use mobile software. The speed isn't an issue. The software's not an issue. What the issues are in the strategic plan, which we had to hone in on, was management. If it's not managed properly, it's not going to work. If we don't have a training and education and knowledge transfer plan, it's not going to work. So what we're saying here, in the summary, and there's a lot more to it, is the fact that we've got 2 huge weaknesses we must improve for GIS to be enterprise, scalable, sustainable, and most of all, enduring. And that's what we were here to do. And I tried to show you this. Instead of a 300-page document, we've tried to put it on one board. So that summarizes it all. So that's where we got to. Then step 4 was the GIS needs assessment. This is the findings I've just talked about. I'm giving you them early. But essentially, over 150 staff, interviewed 29 separate departments, identified over 200 unmet needs for geospatial. When I talk about geospatial, I'm talking about global positioning systems, I'm talking about drones, I'm talking about, AVL, automated vehicle location, anything that really is tied in with geographic information systems. And remember, GIS touches everybody in local government. And then the needs were about more data, and accurate and reliable data, but more software, different types of software, integration of existing systems. The management, again, was a big issue. And one of the recommendations coming out of this study is that we need a new model. And it can be done without too much pain, I think. And then, of course, training, education, and knowledge transfer. None of these are one-time things. When we talk about investing in GIS, this is not a one-time thing. This has to be done on an annual basis. So the investment in GIS is not just, well, let's make one payment and it'll all be over and done with. This is an annual commitment to high technology. Then we move to step 2, which is the system design alternatives. Now, just bear in mind, I talked about the 6 pillars of sustainability. If you're going to design a new GIS or a modified GIS or an improved GIS, you really need to talk in those terms. You need to talk, well, we need a management and organizational structure that will work for the long term. We need a way to maintain and manage all the data and databases. We need interoperability, software, infrastructure has to be maintained, and then, of course, last but not least, training, education, and knowledge transfer. And that are those are the 6 pillars that we hang our hat on with regards to GIS. Now, I'm going to stop because I'm going to invite Kurt, who's president of Geographic Technology, my business partner, to talk about the governance models for a few minutes.
Your Worship, Council, thank you for allowing me to be here. And David talked about a couple of key themes. The one thing I want you guys to think about is it's been said that 97% of everything we do in local government ties back to the Earth's surface. I've sat through the meeting here today. We talked about parks, their locations, park users, where they come from. All of that ties back to the Earth's surface. So when we look at GIS, everything that's being done at local government can be mapped out and analyzed. Now, one of the big challenges David identified is how we're going to manage GIS. What's a better way to use this technology? How can we leverage all of our IT investments? We've spent millions of dollars in IT databases. How can we mine that data out? How can we leverage that data better? So what we did is we took a look at comparators around British Columbia. What are other organizations doing right? What are they doing wrong? And then we also looked at other organizations in North America. One of the things that we discovered is that you truly need a lead GIS person. A GIS manager has different titles at different places. But we have to have that one person who's ultimately responsible for making some of the decisions, such as what are our data standards? What kind of software are we going to use? What are, all the kind of things. There's literally hundreds of things. Having been a GIS coordinator myself in local government, I understand, there's a lot of those things that have to happen. So what we did is we looked at what are some of our options for managing GIS. You have great staff here today. You have a lot of good investment in the technology. One of the things we look at is a best practice. You'll see at the top circle, the top blue circle, it says steering committee, is that we recommend that we have an executive level, department head level type steering committee that helps give advice, because this is a pervasive technology. Everybody at the city is touched by this, and every citizen is touched by this. So we don't need it just to be, thought about as a technology. It's a platform to change what we do in local government. So we need that steering committee, but we also need that GIS lead person and also a GIS team, of which we've got a lot of those staff here today. So option 1 for a management and organization structure is to have the GIS team in engineering. Today we've already got 4 or 5 staff in engineering that do GIS. And it makes sense, what we did is we looked at these different models and presented pros and cons. Here, we looked at this as being as a good option because we have a lot of staff there. It's kind of disruptive if we move those staff to another department and, kind of yank those out and put them somewhere else. Plus, they're one of the biggest users. So we look at engineering and public works who kind of work together. They have, when you look at all the needs, they have the biggest group of needs. So there's some, it makes sense potentially to have that GIS team there. And then also, they're one of the bigger funding mechanisms for the GIS technology. So that was a model we thought had some viability. Another model that we looked at was to have the GIS team in IT as a new business unit. Currently, IT has 2 business units. So one of the options is to create a GIS business unit and move all of that staff that is currently working in GIS, in engineering, over to IT, and then have that GIS manager as well. So that was an option as well. We looked at some of the pros and cons. Certainly, some of the pros is being to be able to work collectively with that IT team, because there is a lot of IT components in GIS. Third option is kind of a nuance of number 2, but in this case, what we do is we leave a couple of staff in engineering, focus mainly on the engineering public works kind of things, then move a couple of staff over to that IT team and still do that IT GIS team. And then option number 4 is even a further nuance on that. In this case, instead of creating a new division within IT, just put the GIS staff under the applications division. And there's a lot of things to wrestle with there. So we've given that over to the departments and the executive group to kind of wrestle with some of the recommendations. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to David and let him talk about the next phase.
Let me say one thing, because I remember being here last time and talking to you, and we were asked some key questions. Here's the truth. We've got to get this right. If this isn't right, it's not going to work. We can try and make it work, but if we don't get the governance right, GIS is never going to be that enterprise enduring solution we all want here at the city. So that's the most important thing. So then we go to phase 3. We have to talk about the business case, and we have to talk about, in terms of which we do in the strategic plan, is how it's improving efficiency, increasing productivity, saving time, saving money, making better quality decisions, improving data, automating procedures, saving lives, improving information processing, complying with mandates, protecting the community, improving communication, providing data, and I can't read the rest. Can you read that? I'm just reading them out. I mean, I'm throwing them out there like confetti. But the key thing is, this is how we need to think about GIS. And the council, if this is going to be funded, we've got to have a business case for GIS. And we do have a business case, a compelling argument to say, this is technology we need at the City of Nanaimo. And every department and every citizen or every person, public, will be touched by it. Step 7, the technology plan. Just bear with me here just for a second. This is, again, my way of summarizing things. If you look at the top, there's a vision statement. And we're nearing completion of the project. So we have a vision statement. Then for each of those 6 pillars, we have an objective. We have a kind of a goal, an objective. And then along here, these are the specific tasks. So all we're trying to do is say, right, let's look at number 1, governance. You may say, well, David, how dare you say that our governance and management model for GIS is poor? Well, that bar chart illustrates how we came up with that. There's 30 solid questions about how GIS is managed, and that's how you and we rated you. So that bar chart is your benchmark. Now, bear in mind, the nice thing about this, the beauty of this, is that if and when we move forward with this, that bar chart will change. So if the council want to see improvements, and there is an investment and want to see improvements, that bar chart's going to go up, because all of those components equal a very successful governance model. So that bar chart equals the circle. It's just a dashboard. And everything running down that are all the tasks that have to be accomplished to improve that bar chart. Okay, so it's a case of benchmarking where we are now and then monitoring our success. And they're called key performance indicators. We now have a recipe for success. We have a blueprint for improvement, or, we'll see how it goes. And then the same for data and databases. You can see, actually, we're not in a bad place. That's where all the money has been spent. In every local government in North America, Millions have been spent on that. And what we're saying is we're not mining that data, okay? But now we can see clearly there's about 15 questions there that are crucial to the accuracy and reliability of digital data. And the city of Nanaimo is in a good place with that. It's just that we're not using it. We've got nobody to manage it, and we can't get it out there, okay? And then 3, you can see, that these questions on procedures and integration, that's what I call interoperability. There's data out there we're not pulling into the GIS and mapping. Again, with the GIS software, we have room for growth. And you get the idea with regard to training and education. I think that's a bad situation, okay? It speaks volumes, the bar chart. And we could add more questions to it if we want, but that's something that everybody in every department wants: education, training, and knowledge transfer as to how geospatial sciences can improve their lot. And the same again with infrastructure. We're okay with infrastructure. But you can see this table goes on, and this is our back of the envelope description of what tasks need to be accomplished. I'm going to pass it to Kurt. We're going to kind of finish, hopefully with a crescendo, but I know Kurt's going to show you some software.
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road. I mean, we're talking about a lot of the things that go into making a geographic information system, geospatial technology work. But the key is that, the culmination of all of this are the applications that are being used. We can have, David already mentioned, we've got a lot of great data sitting in a database, but we can't see that database. I want to be able to visualize that database, to see everything that's there so I can make better decisions. Now, the beautiful thing about being in GIS today is that over the last 5 years, the GIS industry and one of the leading companies has poured hundreds of millions of dollars into trying to make GIS easier to use. And that's kind of a reaction to Google. Everybody here probably has used Google Maps. That's fairly easy to use. The GIS industry for local government was behind. When I was a GIS coordinator, to be honest with you, the applications stunk. They weren't very good. They weren't user-friendly. But today, they are so much easier to use. So David and I like to use something we call the 2-click rule. If it takes more than 2 clicks to get to the information I need to see, then it's probably too much. So what we're going to look at right now is an emergency operations center and public safety kind of use of the software. We're going to look at, hey, if there's a disaster here, how can we visualize the data in a command center? As we go out and do a rapid damage assessment, how can we use easy-to-use tools and have that information fed directly back? And then even, we're going to finish it off here real quickly with how the fire department can even improve what they're doing. They're already doing some GIS, but there's always room for growth and improvement. So let's take a look at that. One more. Okay.
The GIS tool here is the Emergency Operations Center Damage Assessment and Data Input tool. The outcome allows users to quickly input damage assessment data real-time from multiple platforms. These data are then shared to all users that need to visualize Emergency Operations Center data as it happens in the real world. Next, we will look at the EOC dashboard. The EOC dashboard is a culmination of all these data in an easy-to-read and configurable application. These data are visualized based on location on any device. The setup and configuration of the dashboard can be done in multiple ways. The benefit here shares data as events unfold to all users, including EOC command staff and field personnel, as well as the citizens. Next, we will look at the GIS Fire dashboard. As you can see, this application is very similar to the EOC dashboard, just visualizing different data that's driven to the appropriate user. Here, record management system data coming from a fire record management application is visualized for calls for service, response times, and much more. Address lookups can be done, which enables spatial analysis from data from disparate resources in a single, easy-to-use interface. Here we see a video walkthrough inside of a location, as well as a pre-fire plan associated with an address.
So the interesting thing we're seeing here is that GIS is the portal into all information in local government. It's interesting, in the video we showed all the fire incident information. When you guys were getting the presentation, I think one of you asked about where were the Parks and Rec users coming from. Well, if we have that database, we can quickly map that out. Oh, I'm sorry, do you have
It's okay, just to follow up on this for our local piece. So I just came back from Williams Lake after running the Emergency Operations Center for the last 8 days. GIS would have been fundamentally appreciative at that stage, because when we were sending people out to do rapid damage assessments, they were doing them on a piece of paper. So instead of having the GIS application loaded up on tablets to go out there for when you hit range, those exact plots were to come back to tell you where those houses were and to be able to have an understanding whether those houses were still standing, partially standing, or gone. This would have fundamentally changed how they're doing their response recovery program right now as we speak.
And any responsible local government, now the technology's there, this software we're talking about, a lot of this is just part of the suite you have. It's really about how we're going to manage and set it up. So that's a great point. And having, we had lunch together, and that was a great topic. This is real. If we can have that live information. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to the slide with the city, or the fake city you had up there? See who?
In the video itself?
The video, all those dots that were around.
Yeah, it's in the video.
So, I don't know if we have that, I don't think we have this, but when this gets rolling, for example, what's hit us lately in the last little bit is nuisance homes. So could we have that map around town and saying those dots where this RCMP is called this house this many times, or
absolutely,
like where there's problems, and that way we can figure out the themes.
And that was one of the layers that was identified that they wanted to have. So it's in a database. We're already putting that in the database. Visualizing that is just kind of natural for GIS. So the answer is yes.
See, just to close, sorry, it's like, because we discussed one home the other day that had like maybe 11 to 14 calls, and one unit had like 140 calls over a time frame. And not to dwell on that, but they have the data right there, how many calls to this home.
And you can even show that as a heat map. So you can show clusters of calls, and we're going to even see that on the next video here in a second. Okay.
So we're on the same page.
Absolutely. Let me advance past that one. So we're in the GIS for utilities. We're going to see some of that same clustering. So let's take a look at some of these same concepts for utilities. And it's every department. 100% of the departments has their own needs. But let's take a look at utilities real quick.
Leveraging GIS for utilities is a powerful way to analyze, view, and visualize data that's important for a utilities group. In this example, the GIS tool is utility mapping. Various locations such as water lines, utility accounts, gives the user the ability to search and query these data and get a big picture of overall utility infrastructure throughout the organization. Here, map tips are used to bring up appropriate attributes about utility locations in a certain area. Also, patterns of utilities and work order locations can be leveraged. By integrating a work order management system into GIS, the user can understand the change or capital improvement projects throughout the organization. Here, a query for work orders associated with the water line and heat maps are leveraged to show hotspots based on where the majority of work orders are occurring. This identifies the trouble spots, and then a capital improvement project can be initiated to replace the water line and reduce the number of work orders. Here, an example of notifying citizens through mailing labels after an analysis is done to identify all the utility accounts associated with the water line. The result set brings all the utility users within that area, and a mailing label report is generated to send the notification to those citizens. Finally, overlaying as-built drawings on top of utility infrastructure and work orders allows the users to identify exact locations of work orders as they fall within the as-built drawing. Also, dashboarding is leveraged for an easy-to-use overall view of these data as it flows through the GIS in various systems. The common operation picture that gives the user the ability to make sense of what's happening real-time throughout the organization.
In real time is important. So we look at the dashboards. If somebody's going out there affecting a work order, I can see it immediately because they're live in the field. I close a work order, I now see on that little dial less open work orders. So that's the kind of thing that's inherent in the GIS technology today. A couple more quick videos and then we'll wrap it up. Another thing is it's not just a tool for internal use. Another big kind of push in local government is to allow the citizens to contribute to the governing and the local government, as it were. In this case, we're going to look at an application that allows citizens to give feedback to the city. We're going to look at maybe some problem things that are going on, but it could be maybe you have a rezoning or, something that you just want public comment on, new park, whatever. You could put that out there in a geographic context and allow them to give you some feedback via the GIS. So let's take a look at that.
Crowdsourcing is a process that involves outsourcing tasks to a distributed group of people. It's a problem-solving task. GIS lends itself perfectly to leverage crowdsourcing and 311 applications to engage citizens. Leveraging GIS within crowdsourcing streamlines and automates the process. It keeps citizens informed through constant updates, saves time, and routes records and requests for service to the appropriate department. Individuals can add requests based on the city's request requirements. Each one of these requests are then routed to the appropriate department for closure of the issue. Here, the end user is inputting a request for service through a smart device, tablet, PC, or smartphone. Images and video files are then posted about the request. The benefits of leveraging 311 and crowdsourcing allow citizens to engage with the various departments real-time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Here, the GIS tool for crowdsourcing and 311 is being leveraged on a smart device, such as an iPad or tablet. Information about the requests are viewed and shared throughout the organization and other public users.
All right, and the last example we're going to show you is some more public-facing things. And I love this technology. As a visitor to the city, I'm able to already use these things that you guys have rolled out. Because when we first came here, you have so many great things going on in the city, but it's taken us 6 or 7 months to really get a feel for all that. Now I can turn to your website and look at some of these what are called story maps that are allowing you to tell the story of the city. And every department had some of their own stories they wanted to tell, things that they wanted to present to the public. So let's show you three or four of those that you already have available and a lot more coming. So let's take a look at what that looks like, a story map.
Here we will look at multiple examples of how story maps can be leveraged to engage citizens throughout the organization and public application. The first interface is the Nanaimo Waterfront Walkway. Here, multimedia data can be tied to a GIS interface to show the strategic plan, update, as well as additional documents, photographs, and multimedia data. As the user scrolls through the application, different sets of data will populate the window as well as the map. Here we're looking at the Departure Bay Beach area with historical photography, as well as the current photography and additional flyovers for the users. Also, a tab has been created for the Waterfront Walkway Quick Wins. Here there's multiple locations throughout the city that shows the quick wins of the initiative that the city has undertaken. Next we will look at the Georgia Greenway project as it would appear on a smart device such as a tablet or smartphone. The applications will automatically resize based on the device that the user is interfacing with. The speed of the application is very good, especially when using these devices. In this case, the user has located a proposed multi-use trail for the area that they live in. Next, we'll look at a road map as it applies to the historic and current and potential area for the road construction project. The swipe map can be leveraged to show what the current area looks like based on the road, as well as the proposed area after the construction and project is completed. Finally, we'll look at a public art initiative story map. This is how the public art initiative looks on a desktop, and then we'll switch over to a smart device. Again, the application resizes to best fit the device that the user is currently using. The user can scroll from location to location to visualize the photographs as well as additional information about each location along the art walking tour. Tabs are easy to identify and use throughout the application. Scrolling between the media, the map, and an entire list of all the features within the art walking tour is very easily done for the end user.
conclusions, therefore, really is the fact, and I recap on these words I keep using because it's important. I believe we, and it's the royal we, have developed a roadmap, a GIS roadmap for the city, and that includes all the departments and all the staff, and Kurt, myself, and our staff. And we built something that I think that is strategic in nature. It's enterprise because it involves everybody. It's sustainable because of the software we're using. It's scalable because we're working with web tools, we're working with mobile tools, we're working with desktop tools, and of course, it's enterprise. But the key thing is we must select the optimum management and organization structure. I think that's the key, the one lesson we've learned, and we've proposed 4 alternatives. We must hire that independent GIS coordinator. I call them Geographic Information Officer. My prediction is in 10 years we're going to have Geographic Information Officers in government, and they're going to oversee everything to do with geospatial technology. It's important to have that just because of what's going on. 3 is we need to ratify this GIS technology plan. And obviously, the council are very much part of that. It's important to bless this roadmap we've created. Then we need to implement a true enterprise GIS training, education, and knowledge transfer plan. I know I've said that a few times today, but this includes user group meetings, it includes conferences, it includes workshops here, called brown bag lunches. It includes educating and working with all users of GIS within all of the departments, okay? And then 5th, innovate with Esri software. Here's the odd thing about this. Everything we put together, everything in the plan, everything we've shown you, with regard to software, you already own it. You have an enterprise licensing agreement with ESRI. That means all of the software they have, you own. So there's no purchase of any software needed. It's the person hours and the management and the training and education. So we're in a great place. And then 6, we need to continue building accurate and reliable GIS data. And that takes management and it takes procedures. Again, final word is a huge thanks to the city and the city staff. It's been fun. We started in January, so we've been enjoying coming back and working with everybody. We're nearing completion, we're nearly there. So thanks to everybody, and I appreciate everybody's time and interest.
Questions, Councillor Park?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. Extremely interesting, most of it above my head by a large degree, but I can just see a myriad of uses for this system. My question is, once such a system is in place, you made reference to the fact that the data has to be continually updated for it to be useful on a long-term basis. Who would be responsible for that? Is it one person from each department? How would you coordinate inputting all of the changes that would occur on a daily basis?
Well, let me answer that in the changing governance models, the changing management models. I think in this day and age, to answer your question, is we're looking at a distributed model where we have custodians of data. We have custodians of data in each department. Each department is the custodian and owner of their digital data layers, and it is their responsibility to maintain that data. And it's very much part of their job description to maintain their digital data. Each department has their own digital data layers to maintain, but it's shared in a corporate data structure database. That's really key. Otherwise, what happens is, a centralized model would, well, we've got 5 people or 10 people in this room maintaining all the data. That doesn't work. We're finding a hybrid model, which is subject matter experts in all the departments and a GIO or a geographic coordinator with key staff running the show and enabling everybody. Obviously, Kurt has something to say on this matter.
Let me just jump in real quick, because it comes down to, almost every data set. So let's take the fire department. Most of their data is already living in databases, and all that can be automated behind the scenes. So they don't have to create much data because they're already creating that data.
So we're paying a lot of money for these IT databases. Now, with that said, if they want to go out and do a hydrant flow testing and things that they do anyway, then they may be contributing to that GIS database. So they'll have tools to where, hey, my hydrant flow is this, and it goes right into the database. They're doing it now, and every department is that way. So when we look at engineering and public works, they're doing a lot of it. We've already got GIS staff. Community planning has a GIS staff person. So, you know, we're kind of, it's not that it's a big new burden because we've been doing GIS for 20 years. It's just kind of reinventing it. So it really comes almost down to every department, every layer, and there's all kinds of different ways. Literally, we can have 100 layers automated because of all of your data sets. Think about all those data sets that sit here now. All can tie to a piece of property, to an address, that kind of thing. If that makes sense. So you're already contributing to most of this data anyway.
But the key thing to remember, and we want to be open about this, is GIS should be part of everybody's kind of life, as it were, and responsibilities to maintain it, you know, distributed really. So, yeah.
Thank you. Professor.
Thank you. I really appreciate when you're here last, and really appreciate that you're here with an update on the work that you've undertaken. And I'm probably going to overstate the obvious. Garbage collection, recycling collection, bus schedules, swimming schedules, skating schedules, pool schedules, at 2 clicks.
That's the goal. 3 clicks, he said.
You told me you had 2 clicks.
Well, no, the point, let me say something about that. The idea with geospatial technology now is if people, one, the software has to fly, has to be fast, and 2, they have to get to the information they want within 2 clicks. Okay, that's the point, and absolutely yes, everything you mentioned should be available to everybody within a few clicks. Yes.
And even that example, when you talk about a lot of the parks and rec things, pool schedules, I want to be able to see all my assets, you know, what's close to me, click on that pool, you know, click on that asset, and then maybe have that link to the pool schedule so I can click and the pool schedule pops up. So I don't have to go somewhere else or get on the phone. I want to, as a citizen or an employee, I want it all right there in that one portal so I can dig into it. Now, I may be tying to 6 different systems, but what I'm seeing is the spatial representation of that. Anyway, long-winded answer.
And if I may, obviously far more real time, because when we're doing schedule changes, that takes place over weeks and sometimes months. But in the meantime, something has changed that we can't really change that's already in print. And brochures and things.
Let me say something. This is interesting because a year and a half ago, we did a strategic plan for a city in Minneapolis. And the Parks and Recreation Department said, let's sit down, we need a real-time solution for Parks and Recreation. But here we are a year and a half later, we working with that city have just won an international award for a real-time Parks and Recreation Green City GIS. Because it was real time, meaning that you're looking at staff in the field in real time. I'm changing something about a park bench and it's in real time. Everything is real time, absolutely. That's why we need a geographic information officer, because they make it happen. They put the pieces in place, but real time, big data analytics. So you've seen the dashboard. That dashboard, if we were showing you the dashboard and I was outside making a change, let's say I was changing, you know, an attribute on a feature, it would change on the dashboard as well. So yes, that's the goal, real time, big data analytics.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. There is a recommendation.
I move staff recommendation we receive report.
Thank you. Seconder? Seconded by Councilor Thorpe. Thank you. Moved by Councilor Holland, seconded by Councilor Thorpe. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. In favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item 9A, correspondence from Chris Blackmall, Corporate Officer, Metro Vancouver, dated 2017, July 27th, with respect to the UPCM resolutions on electric vehicle charging in stratified multi-unit residential buildings. No action required. This is simply correspondence for delegates going to UPCM. Can we have a motion to receive the correspondence? Moved by Councilor Vesper, seconded by Councilor Hall. Thank you. Discussion? Councilor Rocan.
Thank you. Just regards to these, I have no comment, well, somewhat a comment on these motions. So Oh, we're not there yet? Oh, we're on correspondence, sorry. Never mind, my bad. My 8th mistake today.
Thank you. Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, notice to motion with respect to UBCM, and that would require, that's just a notice of motion. That's going to have to be a late resolution going to UBCM from Councillor Brennan. Councillor Thorpe. We're going to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. I offer to introduce this as Councillor Brennan is absent. The notice of motion for the Union of BC Municipalities is as follows. Whereas the term of office for local government elected officials in BC was increased from 3 to 4 years, beginning with the 2014 local general election, and whereas in many communities the service of local government elected officials is considered to be a part-time commitment with levels of remuneration that reflect this, and the 4-year term may deter elected officials from running for a second term, thereby reducing the number of experienced elected officials on regional district boards and municipal councils throughout the province. Therefore, be it resolved that the provincial government amend the Local Government Act to reduce to 3 years the term of office for local government elected officials, allowing a broader range of elected officials with experience to participate in local government. Councillor Brennan will be making that motion at our next regular council meeting.
Which will be September the 11th.
That's my understanding.
It's on the agenda for September 11th. Thank you very much. Question?
Yes. What? I'm just going to ask a question. Just a question to legislator or Victor. Late notices going to the UBCM or the FCM or the ADICC, there's oftentimes sort of those terms of engagement. We don't get it in by, and I guess this is late, obviously. So September the 11th, no action until September the 12th or 13th. UBCM is September 25th or 6th. I'm guessing that the resolutions are probably put to bed by a certain date. I'm just guessing. But I'm just asking the question: have we made any inquiry to the UBCM resolution makers, the menu, to say, yeah, there's still a chance for this to get on or not get it? Like, do we know?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Bestwick, we have gotten in touch with UBCM and they gave advice on the wording. And if this motion goes before you next meeting, September 11th, and is passed, there is time if we get it in right away.
Thank you very much.
Just wondering why their website says by June 30th each year.
Again, this will be a late resolution.
Okay.
All right, next item. Notice of motion re-accessibility audit of city-owned and operated facilities. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm speaking on behalf of Councillor who is absent tonight. Councillor Armstrong advised that she will be bringing forward the following motion. So this is a notice of motion that Council directs staff to deliver a report detailing the accessibility of all city-owned and operated facilities, including buildings, parks, and trails, for accessibility to those identified as protected groups under human rights legislation. Councillor Armstrong wishes to bring that motion forward at our next regular meeting.
Thank you very much. I see Ms. Gray nodding, so I suspect it's on the agenda. Thank you. No other business. Delegations on 12A from the...
No, there is, sorry, Your Worship, there is...
Pardon me, that's correct. Councillor Bestwick.
Let me just find it, because I took a picture of the, my apologies, I wasn't quite ready.
I was just actually, I'm getting Derek to bring that motion back up on the screen, if that's what you're looking for. Is it?
So I have it before me, if you'd like to proceed.
Almost.
I have it in front of me. I would so move that council direct staff to work with the HCFC to develop the Bevan Park Fields area and to return to council with improvement options and cost. Specific areas of focus are installing artificial turf and lights at Bevan Park, or at Bevan Fields, and add additional change rooms and storage capacity at Marlborough. That is the motion that I.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Discussion. Okay, Mr. Mema, I have a question for you. Earlier this year, there was a tremendous amount of kerfuffle about motions that were being brought by independent organizations. This is a motion that's being brought forward by an independent organization. Do you have any comment on that?
I don't, because I probably wasn't paying attention back then. Did we come up with any policy at the time? So the comment I would make is council as a body can always accept or reject this if there's no policy. But what I see with this one is it just gives direction to staff. You're not making any decision. You're basically saying, hey, go do some research, work with this group, come back and work with us. We can take this offline and discuss if there's any policy options that we can implement for the future.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? It's moved and seconded. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is under delegations, and that is delegation from Mr. Duart Rapton.
Your Worship, could I just speak before the delegation comes up? I just wanted to remind council that at the July 24th council meeting, there was a motion put on the floor and accepted, made by Councillor Cheryl Armstrong, that staff, that council refer the discussion regarding 432 Howard Avenue back to staff before any decisions were made by council. And an update for you that staff has prepared something that will be available at the September 11th meeting. So you're hearing from Mr. Duart Raptor this evening and Mr. Leon Cake. Though that motion is being acted upon, that staff is going to report back to you on September 11th regarding this property, which was the motion made in July 24th.
Thank you. Mr. Mema, I'm concerned about taking delegations on an item that we've asked staff to go away and do work on that's not completed at this point.
So I think council can actually listen because your constituency has a right to be heard. You can listen, you don't have to make a decision today pending staff report, at which point you make your decision. So you can actually proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Rapton.
Yes, sir.
The floor is yours.
Your Worship, I'll be speaking on behalf of Mr. Rapton. I'm Mr. Rapton's lawyer. My name is Matthew Vandenhuizen. Hello, Your Worship and Council.
Sir, just before you start, you're not on the delegates list tonight, sir?
Well, I'm representing Mr. Rapton, so I wouldn't imagine. I have some information to present to Your Worship and Council that I think you'd probably like to hear. Our goal is to try to seek a negotiated or a mediated solution to this. So I'm here to just present some information, hopefully have you consider that information. Obviously, you're not going to come to any decisions as tonight is a committee of the whole meeting. I think my client's interests deserve to be heard tonight in this forum. And
I phoned and asked if I could bring you, and he said yes.
Yeah.
That must have been the biggest one.
Yeah.
Okay, so gentlemen, procedurally, you're not on the list. So I need to go back to council to amend the agenda to allow this delegation. Is there a motion to that effect? Councillor Besser.
I would so move that we hear the delegation from Mr. Rapton, and I'm going to look for the delegation request form.
It's on the...
Your Worship, so we can move along.
Leon Cake is on the agenda.
Yes.
We're not talking about Mr. Cake.
So, Your Worship, you have Mr. Rapton.
Yes.
And he has chosen to speak through his lawyer. And so you don't need to make any change at this point.
So that is the way the delegation request reads?
No, so he retains that right anyways.
That would normally be the law, Your Worship, I think.
So we can't say to him, he can't bring his lawyer. He's whatever his lawyer says, is him talking on his behalf. So so I think I would recommend you just proceed and listen to the delegation. You don't need to make a decision today. We have a report coming in front of you to discuss, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm happy to answer any questions as I go along. I just want to start off by writing some things on the board, and I'm going to try and touch on those as I go through. So I want to keep in mind that, sort of the name and shame campaign idea here, because that's part of our concern. I want you to remember a few things about my client himself. Mr. Rapton is, I'm sure as you're already aware, he's a senior living here in Nanaimo. He's also somebody who has bipolar disorder. You may or may not be aware of that, perhaps by his behavior. You may have surmised that potentially he did suffer from sort of disorder. He is bipolar, and I would like to apologize on his behalf to council and other people who are here in the room for his behavior, both this evening and prior. My client has a tendency to get quite emotional about this issue. He's currently facing a bill of over $90,000, which is a lot of money for anyone, and this is putting him under a lot of stress. The other point that I'd like you to mention, or just like you to remember, and I'll just quickly mention, is that my client has suffered a lot of loss in the past few years. He's lost 2 sisters, and he's lost a brother-in-law within the past 3 years, and so he's been struggling. He's had ups and downs, but while this has been going on, he has definitely been in a down period in his life. So these are the things that I want you to keep in mind. And then in terms of the property itself, I just want to highlight that there actually was a fire on the property prior, and I'll get back to this and as to why that is important a little bit later. The second point I'd like to make is that, as we all know, some soil was deposited on the property. The third point that I'd like to focus on is the contamination issue, which is what has brought us to where we are today. There was some testing done. And then the fourth is that the soil is removed. And the fifth point is my client currently faces a bill in excess of $90,000 from the city. He was told that it would be around $40,000 before, and we would argue, and some would agree, some would probably disagree, that my client should in fact pay the city $0. So, Mr. Mayor, Council, you may or may not be aware that there was actually a fire on the property some time ago. Fairly recently, I think. I'm not sure about the exact time, but you could perhaps talk to the fire department, go into the GIS system that exists, and find out that there was a fire. And the reason why this is important is because of the issue of contamination. I'm not sure whether or not soil testing was done after the fire. Because a fire, as I'm sure we're all aware, can actually contaminate the property, as happened in Fort McMurray recently. But there's a question as to whether or not contamination is actually a risk to the environment or a risk to people living in the city. So contamination may have actually been pre-existing before the soil was deposited on the property. That is the first and most important thing that I would like everyone here, especially those who have the information at their fingertips, to figure out. Is it possible to actually determine when the contamination arose on the property? And if, as I suspect, that it's not, that the contamination may well have been pre-existing, then this soil that was deposited on the property may have not been contaminated, which would make this whole thing a very big error in judgment. If we can determine that the contamination was present afterwards, there are a lot of issues with testing. And I highly doubt that the testing was done in a rigorous manner to determine exactly where and how much overall on the site contamination was present. So, like, I will stand with, I'm sure, everyone else in this room here that is concerned about the environment. We all love going to the Buttertubs Marsh. We love going to Neck Point Park. We love going and enjoying the natural beauty, and it's very important that our environment stays clean. But there have been things happening in government with the Ministry of the Environment, allowing testing not to be done on contaminated properties. That's one thing that could be wading into this. I don't know. Weak laws regarding soil removal and depositing. Those deserve another look. When I just leaf through this very quickly, what I see is, well, you know, it doesn't look that bad, but you can move a heck of a lot of soil without having to undergo any kind of rigorous or even any kind of permitting procedure at all. And I think that should be a concern to everyone here. It should be a concern to your worship, the mayor, and to all the council members, and to the people who are working for the city of Nanaimo, and to the people living in the city of Nanaimo. Even the fines, completely unreasonable. Like, you can remove or add fill without a permit, amount of fine, $50? You know, like, the worst fine that you've got here, remove or add fill, making development impractical, $200. That's a joke. So, you know, I don't think that my client is really the one to blame here. I feel that there is an element of a name and shame campaign going on here. And yes, my client's property right now is an unmitigated eyesore. But I don't know that it's the worst property in the city. And I think if the city wants to undertake to identify properties that have issue, be it contamination or just plain eyesore, you know, depreciating other people's property values and detracting from the beautiful city that we have, then I can understand that. But everybody needs to be treated equally. Right now, my client is being singled out, and he's got a $90,000 bill to show for it. And I think we need to think about, you know, is that really fair? Is that really reasonable? Is that equitable? Is it legal to do those things? And I would argue that it's not. So, if you'd like to take a look, you can actually go on Google Maps, and if you fiddle with the view, you can look at 432 Howard Street as it was after a fire, and you can actually see the remnants of part of the structure there that have burned down. Could these remnants have produced lead, zinc, tin? The answer is yes. They could have produced all those things on this property. Okay? I sent to the city, I sent a little bit of information just so that the city is also aware of some of these substances. We all know lead is toxic. That's a no-brainer. But lead has been found in things we've used for a very long time. Paint, plumbing, all kinds of things we've had over the years that use lead. Tanks. Okay? There are lots of potential sources for lead. Zinc. Well, some would argue on zinc toxicity, so I don't even know what kind of levels of zinc were there, but they may or may not have been an environmental hazard, depending on how much you love rabbits, because apparently it does impact rabbits. So, I mean, I do like rabbits and potentially could be having an impact on rabbits. I don't know. But I don't know the actual levels of zinc present. Tin in canned food. Tin covering things on external structures. How much tin? I don't know. We used to, and we still do, put food in tin cans. Is it that dangerous? Well, probably not. So, I'm sure some people were paying attention to the news when Fort McMurray was happening, and they may have seen an article in the Globe and Mail, which I sent to the city as well, that tests revealed toxic levels of contaminants in Fort Mac soil and ash. And then Maclean's published an article shortly after, no health concerns over soil after Fort McMurray fire. And we could be in a similar situation here, that the city is targeting, picking on my client because he's bipolar
because sometimes he's frankly probably being an asshole, okay? He's actually not a bad guy when you get to know him, but he does use some colorful language, okay? And I think this is something that the city needs to keep in mind. So I wrote a quick letter to the city, which I'm sure if you ask the Legislative Services Department, you can take a look at. It's 3 pages long, and I just highlight, some of the information. And if you're taking a look at this, in the list of facts that I've listed there, I'd like you to pen in, there was a fire on the property. Okay? That's the 0 fact. So as it stands right now, my client, he's got an invoice from the city for $91,000, $91,085.80. Okay?
It's higher now.
And it's higher now because there's probably interest being charged. I have an invoice here from Leah Lekowicz Engineering and Associates that they did some testing. I don't have the details of those tests. Okay, there's been media coverage around this. And what I would say is that I would beg your worship and council to take a close look at this file, okay, and to consider how much more media attention do we want on this issue, okay, because I don't want to see the city dragged down any more than it's already been dragged down in the media, nationally, I might add. But this is a real issue, and if you're going to pick on my client, then you better make sure, really, really sure that he's the one to blame. I'll direct your attention to an RFQ, okay? This was put out by the city. What does this request for quotation say? Okay, on page 5. The scope of work for this project includes the removal of contaminated soil from the site at 432 Howard Avenue to be disposed at the RDN landfill as contaminated soil, and the cost for disposal shall be paid at actual costs. And then it goes on, the removal of discarded building materials, including asphalt shingles, drywall, concrete molding, doors, windows, plumbing fixtures, etc. The removal of all discarded household materials, including furniture, electronics, appliances, tarps, containers, loose and baked garbage. The removal of any miscellaneous debris from the property, grading the property to meet the requirements of the city of Nanaimo. I want to see pictures. But half that doesn't have anything to do with soil.
A lot of that stuff, my tenants.
So we have invoices here from the Milner Group, and we have over $72,000 going to the RDN landfill. Okay? A lot of the people present here tonight also sit on the RDN board. That's a lot of money. It's $125 a ton for contaminated soil. And I'm not saying that, well, maybe that's the best place for contaminated soil to end up, but my client's property is not the only property that's contaminated in the city of Nanaimo. There are hundreds, if not thousands of properties contaminated in the city of Nanaimo from a century of coal mining, coal exploitation, at least. Okay? There's a lot of contamination out there. Even Butterfields, which is a previous site used for coal, is probably contaminated. If I was to go out there with some engineers and pick a few spots, do you want to know what I'd come back with? I should also note that the city, the soil that went on my client's property came from within the city. It came from 2 kilometers away. 2 kilometers away.
No, half a kilometer away. It's right over here.
Well, 2 kilometers according to Google Maps.
My house, yeah.
Maybe half a kilometer as the crow flies, I don't know.
It's on Franklin.
But the 500 block of Franklin okay, within the city, from one site to another site. And right now, my client also faces a legal notation on his title from the city of Nanaimo, okay? That again, I don't know that that has anything to do with soil contamination, okay? Bylaw contravention notice, community charter, section 57. So please, your worship and council, think about this. So that's my presentation, subject to any questions, and I will conclude. Oh, I think I have a question.
I do have a question, but it's for Mr. Mema, if I may, because I'm a little bit confused here, so with your permission, Chair. In terms of process, Mr. Mema, with Mr. Rapton having his legal representative here this evening, it seems to me that this presentation would be more appropriately made to the city's legal department. Why are we hearing this if we're going down a route that is apparently headed to court?
I can answer that question.
I'm asking Mr. Miller.
So, through the chair, the request was for a delegation. Mr. Repton wanted to appear before you at an earlier date. That never happened. So this was his follow-up. He has every right to have his legal representation, and the information that has been sent, we received that, we passed that on to our legal team, and council will be advised at the next meeting on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you. And I just want to know that it is within the power of your worship and city council to make a change. It doesn't have to be like this. And I would like to see our city be more beautiful, but I just don't want to see my client picked out as being the only one who's a problem. Thank you.
Chair, just to let you know, I have to leave in a few minutes. I did not think we'd be here this long. Yeah.
Thank you. Next delegation is Mr. Leonke. So if you have to leave in a few moments, I could get Councillor Yocum to assume the chair.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Right now, Bill?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, it's Leon Cake, 5936 Schooner Way. I've spoke to council before on this matter a few times now, and the reason why I'm speaking to it is I don't know this man. I don't know where, I'm not related to him. I've just been following the process of what's going on here, and this is my 45th year this week in the Public Works of British Columbia as a person working this issue. So I think I've got very good knowledge over the years, and I just want to walk you through some information. I think it's going to help council today. My understanding last time I spoke to council, there was going to be a report coming back in 30 days. Has that report come back to council yet?
Mr. McRae?
Through your worship, as I got called up to the fire event, the report was delayed to September 11th, so I'm just serving the community opinion here. It is ready to go for September 11th.
For September 11th, yes.
Okay, thank you. In that discussion of his fee, I want council to remember there was a $5,000 price tag to remove 3 cars off this person's property. This is the article that was in the paper. That's probably brought us a lot of attention regarding this contaminated cleanup costing $92,000. Going through the process, this is the city's document. It's called Soil Fill Removal and Depositing to or from Your Property, published March 2005. So we haven't really looked at this since 2005. And I strongly suggest, and I have done this before at this council chamber, in regards to looking at some of the things that are that old, and because of the processes that are now changing. The information I got today is off the government website. If you wouldn't mind, Billy, passing each one of those. And basically, this is information, and I spend a lot of time in research, as everyone knows that I do, when I do this. And this is the facts on contaminated sites. And one of the things I wanted to point out, because we are trying to identify this soil, was it contaminated from where it came from and then got contaminated after? But, you know, number one, it says, what triggers the need for a site profile? So in the beginning of this soil moving off this first Franklin Street site, I guess at that point in time, under our city bylaw to move that soil, there was no concern at all. If we follow our own process, it's a process that relates to 420 cubic meters of soil that we then identify by saying we should have a soil sample done because it's a massive amount being moved. What comes through the government's language in a lot of its publications is the word due diligence. You see it in a lot of these pages, and there's lots of pages on contaminated soil and issues around it, and they use the word due diligence a lot. Referring back to that last gentleman's comments regarding the contaminated soil costs, the RDN charges $125 a tonne for contaminated soil, and I want to give you an example of what that looks like on this site. Now, this information came up from a reporter who called me from the Times Colonist that had talked to a city staff member, and she was given the amount of 320 cubic meters of soil that came off that site. So when you take that 320 cubic meters of soil, it equates to about 544 tonnes. So that's how you arrive at the $125 times that 544. You get $68,000 a tipping fee. Now, I want you to imagine, has anybody on council gone past 432 Howard Avenue at all? You know the size of the property. It's sort of a triangular piece of property. So what this says to me, and this is the fees, that 30 truckloads of soil had to come off the site, and 30 truckloads would have probably had to come back or less to fill back in what they took out. The math of that is very disturbing to me, because if you look at this site, I believe personally, knowing volumes from construction, from shoring and trenching, I just can't see where 30 truckloads of fill came off that site and went to the RDN landfill as contaminant to make the $125 a tonne charge, because he's being charged $91,000. So the $68,000, and I think somewhere in a document it refers to $71,000 tipping fee. So you can see that the tipping fee that has been quoted somewhere of $71,000 compared to what I'm saying at $68,000 is awful close. So that, to me, is very, very disturbing, because it's not real. You could not get that much soil off that site, and then you'd have to bring it back, or bring back half, because, like I say, I've been to the site. I was at the site when they originally had the two piles under the tarps. I can tell you, maybe 3 truckloads of soil. So I don't know where the city got the math in that how this was done, and what was trucked off the site and what was put billable at the RDN. Under the government's facts on contaminated sites, there's a comment here. Who was not responsible for cleanup? Under the Act, a person may be exempt from responsibility for the remediation of a site that became contaminated by an act of God or war, a third party unconnected with the owner. So if this person received that soil off of Franklin Street as the third party, and he's not been made aware that he's taken this soil, under the remediation liability overview by the provincial government, I see that this man is not responsible by the legislation from the provincial government on him receiving this soil and where the contaminant started. If there was a fire like this person has indicated, there's a lot of things that could have happened from the burning of the tin cans or anything else. But when I went to that site, I saw a lot of just in that pile of contaminant, more wood fiber, more I didn't see like metal shavings or things like that, so I don't know how the identification was of that. But the remediation liability overview, to me, is the city's out to help this man out. Realistically, he's got a bill for $91,000 for something that he doesn't deserve. So in closing to my conversation here, I've done a lot of research on this. I spent a lot of time looking at a lot of the provincial legislation and the language. Our language is weak. Our removal of soil in the city of Nanaimo states at 420 cubic meters. Then we get concerned about the removal and the process of what that soil, what could be identified in that soil. And that's when we ask for some permitting pieces of documentation to be supplied before the soil can start moving off. So with 320 cubic meters of soil is 30 truckloads, then obviously you can figure out what 420 is. It's probably about 40. So not until we remove 40 truckloads of soil excavation off a site do we get concerned. I think we need to change that legislation so that we don't get caught, even if we force someone to have to test it. Because I'll give you an example. I bought a truck quite a few years ago from Joe Cunningham in Parksville, and I had it for 2 years. And after 2 years, I went to sell it, and it had been a car accident. So I went back to Cunningham and I said, hey, this truck had been in a car accident. You didn't claim that. His comment was, at the time, was, well, if we checked out every car here, we'd go broke because it was like $30 to do this. So $30 to check out a $35,000 car, to me, is pretty cheap. So in regards to the city, we probably need to change our 420 cubic meters down to something more realistic, to something coming off a site, because there are lots of different situations now from what could be in the building envelope or what was on that site previously if we don't do some sort of test. Because a lot of people, as you drive around, you see the signs, free fill wanted. So what we're saying is, hey, I got contaminated soil, this is good. I don't have to worry about it because it starts at 420 cubic meters that I have to go and do some reporting to the city. So we need to look at that. But like I said, this poor man here, this council and our city, and I know there's issues with the building of his home and how he's been dealing with the city building inspections in the building department, but that's another story. This is about an injustice being done to a man for soil that it got onto his site, way less than this 30 truckloads. It could not happen. He could not get a bill for $68,000 of tipping fees. Not happening. And then, of course, on top of that, we said you got to pay the city's union rates for all the removal, all the people on that site. They were there 3 days. In 3 days, they produced a $96,000 bill because it was $91,000 plus $5,000 to remove 3 cars. And we all know what it costs because I checked it out. It's $300 to $500 to move a car off your site. And he got charged $5,000. So I hope this report that comes back, Mr. McRae, shows a lot of due diligence gets done in this report. At the same time, this council makes a conscious decision to support this man because $96,000 is no one should have that strapped on them at this stage in their life. Thank you.
Sir, any questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Just before your last delegation from Mr. Jordan Reichert, he's speaking regarding the proposed ban of retail sales of puppies, kittens, rabbits in Nanaimo. I just want to remind you of the motion made on August 14th as it relates to the correspondence received from the BCSBCA. And you are having staff return to council at the earliest opportunity with a report that outlines options for addressing the concerns listed in the letters from the SPCA and Nature Canada. And so that is just being acted on by staff too, just so you're aware before you hear this delegation.
Okay, thank you. So we've already got motions forward to staff. Thank you. A delegation from Jordan Reichert.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It came to my attention a little over a week ago that the Nanaimo branch of the BC SPCA was advocating for a ban on the sale of puppies, kittens, and rabbits in your beautiful city. I came down from Victoria to present to you on this matter as a representative of the Animal Protection Party of Canada, as it is a deeply multifaceted issue and a tremendous social burden that is often not given the attention it deserves by governments of various levels, whether it's local government, municipal, provincial, or federal. I'm happy to report that we no longer have any pet stores in Victoria that sell cats, dogs, rabbits, or most live animals. As someone who has had to deal with the fallout of the retail sale of rabbits, due to, as some of you may have heard, the Helmicon Overpass rabbits, we've relocated over 100 rabbits from an overpass on the highway coming into Victoria down to a sanctuary in Texas, because that's actually the closest one that meets the guidelines set out by the province. This is a tremendous undertaking that involved the SPCA, veterinarians, many volunteers, and a tremendous amount of money and work hours to get it done. But it has been done, and we're just actually trapping the last 3 rabbits right now off the Helmicon Overpass. But again, this was caused by the problem of people breeding rabbits, people selling them at pet stores, and people not taking much of an interest in them after they're done with them and just disposing of them on the side of the road. So these people, of course, often have to clean up the mess caused by these breeders, by retail stores that sell live animals, and these people do so with their own time, energy, resources, which, of course, is kind of an injustice when you think of all the time that is wasted when it doesn't need to be. This is why the retail sale and breeding of animals for profit is such a disrespectful action to our society. People are profiting off vulnerable lives and leaving the public to deal with the outfall of these irresponsible breeders. So let me make this perfectly clear. There are no responsible breeders. This is a language that's commonly used, even by the BC SPCA, is that there's responsible breeders and irresponsible breeders, but there are none. There's just, people who breed animals for profit. Some do it more humanely than others, but they all contribute to the overpopulation of domestic animals in our communities. So just to give you some background, some statistics on this, so approximately 57% of Canadian households care for pets, or it's about 7.5 million pets in Canada. There are far more cats than dogs in our homes, in shelters and living on the streets. The most recent statistics show that just half of the SPCA's and Humane Society's reporting on this took in 35,000 dogs and 82,000 cats. So that's a fairly small number. It's probably closer to 500,000 animals that are transitioned through shelters each year across Canada. Approximately 4,200 dogs and 16,000 cats are euthanized because they're unadoptable, usually when they reach the shelter, or shelters often in Nanaimo, I know, and across the island often are overflowing with cats, especially throughout the year because of people breeding them, not getting them spayed and neutered and such. And so this is just a fraction of a much larger picture, and it's really kind of a systemic social issue. So why this is important to know is that animals continue to languish in shelters and unfortunately be also abused in our homes. While many of us may never believe that violence against domestic animals is extremely widespread, the reality is that it is systemic. This year, the BC SPCA alone took over 9,700, or investigated over 9,700 cruelty investigations, and that's just the animals that had someone contact the SPCA on their behalf to let them know that they're being abused in their homes. There's so many more animals that never have anybody reach out on their behalf. This also does not include all the abused animals, with approximately 30 animal protection officers in BC, that amounts to a workload of about 326 cases each, and they're empowered to investigate these cases by the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, which is created by the province's legislation. And so you have a non-profit organization which has to deal with the outfall from breeders continuing to breed bring animals into the world irresponsibly, and they're often overwhelmed, and they certainly can't respond to all the calls. And the reality is that our laws are not in place to actually actually follow through with any significant punishment for people who are abusing animals. Less than 1% of cases brought forward before a court related to animal abuse actually lead to a conviction. So, and that's a very, very small percentage that even make it there in the first place. Another aspect of this I've worked on is with Pets OK BC and the lack of affordable housing that actually allows pets. So while we're actually talking about the proliferation of cats and dogs in our communities, we also have to recognize that there's actually not enough homes available to house all these animals. Even if people want to, there's serious restrictions because of the No Pets legislation that we have in BC, in the Residential Tenancy Act and various other associated acts. So I work with an organization, Pets OK BC, also to try to change this legislation to make it more like Ontario's, which has been, which has nullified the No Pets clause for the last over 27 years now, and it's not a significant problem. There are certain reservations, of course, that are very reasonable. If people have allergies or if an animal's dangerous, etc. So approximately 90% of Canadians who care for pets do recognize them as a part of their family. And it's a complete injustice to have to force somebody to decide between their family and affordable, safe housing. Because for many people, this is their companion. For seniors, maybe they've had a dog for many years and makes them feel safe, makes them not feel alone. It's a social aspect. There's lots of important aspects of having animals in our homes. And to this tune, 1,700 animals are abandoned to the SPCA just in BC each year due to housing-related issues. So I want to bring this all back together, though. So why am I telling you about all these different issues? Is that, the question at hand is, should the city of Nanaimo ban the retail sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits? If we consider it from the perspective of the animals themselves, the BC SPCA has already made a good case for the reduction of suffering of animals raised in puppy mill-like situations and then sold at pet stores at a marked up price. The well-being of the animals themselves should be the primary deciding factor and should always outweigh the consideration of profit, is what I would argue to you. From a social responsibility standpoint, I have argued that we have a responsibility as a compassionate community to limit the number of animals dependent upon humans for their care, as the systemic violence against them due to their powerlessness in our homes away from public scrutiny is unconscionable. Furthermore, the burden on the people and organizations who care for the tens of thousands of homeless animals across BC is promoted by the proliferation of animals in the settings allowed by retailers and breeders. It is traumatizing, exhausting, and often thankless work that is further beleaguered by the sale of animals as commodities. I have read the petition opposed to the proposed ban that illustrates the problem with the sale of animals. It is claimed that puppies amount to 40% of one retailer's total sales before tax. When profit is the driving force behind the sale of vulnerable animals, corners are cut to maximize the return and reduce costs. That's just how capitalism works. It's just business. But unfortunately, that is why it is important you heed the concerns voiced by the SPCA. There are numerous pet stores across the island, there's many in Victoria, that do not sell a single live animal. They just sell pet food and toys and other things, and they're completely sustainable. There's no reason to be selling live animals today. It is unlikely there will ever be, another point is that it is unlikely there will ever be a lack of unhomed animals in our communities. And in fact, we should count ourselves lucky if that problem ever does present itself, because it means that we're doing something right. People have a choice in how they make a living, but that choice should be limited when it is founded on the exploitation of other people and animals for profit. It should just be a basic cornerstone of a compassionate society. So lastly, I would ask that you consider including reptiles, fish, and birds in the ban should you decide to go that route. These animals are just as vulnerable and abused as cats and dogs, but they are given so much less consideration due simply to their nature. If you've been to any reptile exhibitions or the former parrot refuge in the Coombs, you know what I'm talking about. We should not look at human animals as property that we are entitled to own. They are vulnerable individuals that are deserving of the same respect as any other members of our community at large, and it should be seen as a social responsibility to care for the situation of overpopulation we created. That also means...
Your time is up, sir.
Okay, can I just finish this last sentence?
Last sentence?
Last sentence. That also means doing what we must to curb the activities that contribute to this overpopulation. Thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Questions from the delegation? Councilor Bessman.
Yes. Another question, but thank you very much for coming and expressing your views as it relates to this subject matter and its importance. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I'll just say that I did send a copy of my presentation to you all. You can read it through the end if you want. And there are links in it to all the information that I referenced, all the reports and such, so for your information.
Thank you very much.
I got a quick question.
Yes.
Earlier in your presentation, thank you, by the way, for your sharing your words and your wisdom, your experience down there in Victoria. Say this went through, there'd be no sale of puppies, kittens, and that, and
Yeah.
what would the next best option be? Like, I heard you in your words say, man, maybe they're, anyways, I won't paraphrase yet, but like, for people who want pets, what would the next, because I'm a little concerned about the online piece.
Yes.
What would the next, is that another conversation or am I offline here? Like,
Well, it's a significant part of the conversation because you do have, I think it's actually mentioned in some correspondence to you from one of the retailers, is that you have people on Kijiji, Craigslist, use Nanaimo, I guess, here or wherever, of people either explicitly recognizing, calling themselves like breeders, or kind of doing it in an underhanded way, saying like, oh, my dog had a litter of puppies and I'm selling them for $500 a piece, right? Or not telling people and then selling them. There's all sorts of problems, and this is a problem across BC. And so when you look at getting at the source of the issue, you have to look at that. Now, it's very difficult because you have to work with those businesses themselves, or those online companies themselves, to actually say, okay, like, you should not be able to post on our sites without with there being more than just a nominal adoption fee of maybe $50 max for a puppy, right, or a kitten, or whatever it is, and they should all have to be spayed or neutered and stuff. It's just a very difficult thing to control, and they have to also get on board. So Kijiji does not have any kind of, they're not really locally oriented, whereas businesses such as Used Everywhere, Used Victoria and Nanaimo are willing to actually impose those types of restrictions on their things. And I know personally from experience that people continue to try to post on those sites, and then somebody has to report, and there's people that actually just watch those pages to report that kind of thing. So, personally, I always think that municipalities need to take a bit of a, I guess, responsibility working with SPCA's, local animal advocacy organizations, to actually educate the public. I do promote, mandatory spay and neuter programs for cats and dogs, because that's essentially where you're stemming the problem. And if you as a municipality can see the benefits to doing something to perhaps fund or work in a partnership with those nonprofit organizations to, Toronto is a great example, a huge city, very different from Nanaimo, absolutely, but they actually have something called the SNP truck, and it actually drives around Toronto, and it'll go to people's places, and they'll do the surgery right there, and then they give people, and it works because people, it's just for low-income people. Yeah, the convenience of it. The other thing, just in connection to this, is, I mentioned the lizard, the reptiles, amphibians and stuff. So it's actually become a significant issue in Victoria with invasive species, red-eared slider turtles and such. You're trying to protect your painted turtles, perhaps, here at the Buttertubs wetlands and such. if that's something that's important, I've been to reptile shows, I've been to these exhibitions and stuff. If you don't kind of like include that, then people move to those areas, and we have an invasive species problem with these turtles. We have an invasive species problem with lizards and with other animals because there's no regulation of it by the city or otherwise. So it's important.
Follow up, please, just quickly. Actually, 2 quick questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
You seem to have a lot of knowledge in this area. So my next one would be, is there a governing, I don't have a good example, is there a governing body that makes one better than the other? Like, to say if you had this, I don't know, is there a governing body on pets? I'm talking about specifically dogs.
On a governing body to what?
To say these are like actually purebred and healthy, not a puppy mill.
Oh.
So come in and do a rubber stamp?
Yes. So there's basically the Kennel Club of BC. So they they're like generally register this. They're a registered group. You have to like register to be in with them. Now that doesn't mean by any standard that these animals, like they don't really check on them. There's no enforcement. That's the problem with the BCSPCA, is that they're limited in their enforcement. They actually can't just go into somebody's property and be like, we're here to check. We heard that you had a puppy mill going on. Well, sorry, if somebody calls and reports that there's a animal being treated like inhumane conditions and such, then they can go and investigate. But because it's not covered under the PCA Act, they can't just go in because they're not businesses that are registered. So anybody, and most of the time, like these people, what they do is you respond to an ad, you go meet them in a Starbucks parking lot, they have the puppy or kitten there, they sell them to you, and then they're gone. Yeah, exactly. And then I've heard so many stories of within a day or two that animal dies because they're just dumping them. Like they don't care. And sometimes and often you get one that dies, they say, bring it back, I'll give you a new one. Like, bring me the body, I'll give you a new one. But they do it kind of under the cover of darkness. And so there's no really true regulating body. Now the BCSPCA has petitioned the provincial government to, because there's been numerous over the last year puppy mill busts and animal hoarding busts. And so they have brought it forward to the province, and there is consideration of new legislation that basically would turn the Kennel Club's own kind of internal rules into legislation where people would have to be basically registered, but there's nothing actually forcing people to register. It would just be kind of, there's nothing stopping people from continuing to do these puppy mill schemes. And the problem, again, just to go back to it, is there's no responsible breeders, just to reiterate, because, somebody's paying $500, $1,000, $5,000 for a dog or cat. Meanwhile, you've got shelters overflowing with animals that need homes. And like, I know people have their favorite brand of like soda or toothpaste or whatever, but animals aren't a brand. Like liking a bulldog versus liking a Shih Tzu versus that's not a privilege that we should be, it's not an entitlement that we have. It should be a privilege to care for every animal and making sure they each have homes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And feel free to contact me if you have any other questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We move into item 13, question period. Agenda items only.
Thank you.
Questions only.
Fred Taylor of Nanaimo. Has anyone seen the 60-minute documentary about selling pets in stores and so on? And they turned around to the end and found that it was a society that was protecting a captive market for themselves, like spade and neuter everybody else's cat and dog, and stop selling them. And you shouldn't even ask for a report of how many animals, dogs, they bring into different shelters even on the island.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. So moved. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Opposed, motion carries.